Good morning, everybody. This is Simon Schaefer from Lisbon, Portugal. I am the founder of Factory.com and the president of Startup Portugal, which is the do tank from the Portuguese government for anything startups and entrepreneurship. Today, we're broadcasting here live from the Ministry of Economy and Digital Transition, which is a fabulous palace in the old town of Lisbon in Portugal. We're broadcasting live for the last event of the Portuguese presidency of the European Council around startups and entrepreneurship. And now follow me as I go into the offices of Startup Portugal, from where this fabulous morning will be started in a second. So, I am very honored today to have you all here. We're going to hear from Commissioner Gabriel, we're going to hear from the Minister of Economy of Portugal, the Secretary of State of Portugal, of Slovenia, and of France, and of course, last but not least, unicorn founders who will give us their input on what Europe needs to do in order to catch up, in order to take a quantum leap and be technical sovereign when it comes to the near future. I have had the honor to share several stages with her, and albeit today it's a virtual stage, it is my honor to welcome you today. Commissioner Gabriel, the stage is all yours. Can I go?
Hello, I don't hear you.
Oh, hello. Good morning, Commissioner.
No.
We seem to have an audio problem still.
Now it's okay. I can hear you.
Wonderful. That's good news. Good morning, Commissioner. A pleasure to have you again. Please.
Always a pleasure.
The stage is all yours. Please. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to warmly thank the Portuguese presidency for inviting me to address you today. This event comes at a key moment for Europe, as it is time to rethink our innovation policy for the years ahead after the COVID-19 crisis. And as we emerge from the pandemic, we must seize the opportunity to make Europe more sustainable, more resilient and more digital, with innovation as main lever. And in this context, disruptive innovations are appearing in all fields and startups are emerging as key players. At the same time, the competition is fierce globally. The US and China are investing respectively 6 and 3 times as much capital in digital startups as Europe. And as a consequence, we are currently lagging behind in the area of digital startups. Nevertheless, Europe has strengths on which we can build upon, such as its excellent science and a strong willingness at all levels to take up this challenge to make Europe a global innovation leader. For this to happen, we need to focus on the new wave of innovation, not only around digital startups, but around deep tech startups. Deep tech startups with a hardware component, and in 94% of the cases focused on addressing the sustainable development goals. These are the kind of startup that we need. We need to move from digital startups that help us to communicate, do shopping, or remote digital work into deep tech startups. Deep tech startups like Zelero's Hyperloop that will help us to move fast and green across cities in Europe. Deep tech startups like Northvolt and Skeleton that will provide us with a new generation of batteries to power our new hardware devices, and deep tech startups like BioNTech that has allowed us to have the first COVID vaccine coming from the EU. With all these startups, what they have in common is that they are science-driven to solve problems of our days, and that they all have been funded by the EU. But why we focus on deep tech startups? We do it for 2 main reasons. First, because deep tech startups are based on science and intellectual property, and we are world leaders in science. It means that instead of focusing on the old wave of innovation, we'll focus on the new wave that will decide which region of the world will become the global powerhouse for innovation. and I want that it is the European Union. Second, because most of these deep tech startups have a hardware component, and we are leaders in many of the industries with hardware component for innovation, and I want that it is the European Union. Second, because most of these deep tech startups have a hardware component, from automotive to construction to energy to food or to chemical. Therefore, European traditional industries to secure European tech sovereignty for the future. Tech sovereignty understood as a possibility to be able to choose. And I'm very happy that the European investors are also focusing on deep tech startups with hardware component. This was demonstrated to one battery cell and storage startup Northvolt, investors who had never invested into digital startups, such as pension funds or foundations. At the same time, also 1 week ago, a large European digital startup also closed a large investment round. In this case, there were no European investors, only Japanese and American investors. And these examples show clearly the way forward to become global world leaders on the new generation of innovators. And on this journey to the future, I was aware from the beginning that we could only do this if we were giving voice to the new generation of innovators. That is why we created the Unicorns Group and the Innovation Ecosystems Leaders Group. They have now become independent groups that will be levers to change the landscape of innovation in Europe. And my services are now seriously analyzing the 8 proposals included in the lead canvas prepared by the Unicorns Group, from the European Tech Sovereignty Fund to the scale-up public procurement to small valleys or the European Blue Card. And this analysis is combined with the analysis that we are also doing of the 21 actionable ideas included in the action plan provided by the Innovation Ecosystems Leaders Group to multiply by 10 the number of European unicorns. From ensuring equal opportunities wherever you are based in Europe, to the support to communities of women entrepreneurs, or a European definition of the different stages of the life cycle of a startup. All these ideas, together with the ideas received from other stakeholders, are being analyzed to understand what is new that should be included into our European innovation policy and what we already have. The result of this analysis will become the blueprint to build a true pan-European innovation ecosystem focused on deep tech startups and on innovation ecosystems, while not leaving anyone behind, from women to rural areas. And yes, my vision is to co-create with the innovators the pan-European innovation ecosystem around 4 axes. The first one is to ensure European technological autonomy and sovereignty. We should not depend exclusively on other regions of the world to provide us with the necessary technologies. Europe should be an innovation leader. The second axis is to provide consistent, innovation-friendly regulatory framework. To give an example, we must multiply the test beds to bring innovations on the market and make them mature so they are ready for the scale-up phase. This will help the growth of startups and the emergence on the long run of European deep tech champions. The third axis will focus on ensuring that no one is left behind. On one hand, by improving innovation cohesion among countries and regions. On the other hand, by promoting more women representation among the people behind startups. For instance, nearly 90% of the founders of startups are men, and this underrepresentation of women means that many talents cannot express themselves, reducing our capacity to innovate. And finally, we must focus on the new wave of innovation based on deep tech and new combinations of scientific knowledge and technologies. At the same time, innovation is increasingly coming from sources other than research and researchers, be it from entrepreneurs, end users, citizens, students. Connecting all of these actors in a true pan-European innovation ecosystem matters more now than ever before. And in order to build this pan-European innovation ecosystem, Europe has already put in place some instruments, Allow me to briefly mention them. First, the European Innovation Council. That will be our European unicorn factory by financing through blended finance, European startups and innovative SMEs pursuing disruptive innovation projects focused on deep tech. Second, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology that is developing innovation communities in 8 sectoral industries, connecting innovators from all over Europe. And third, the European Innovation Ecosystems Program that will interconnect local ecosystems across Europe. And finally, the European Strategy for Universities that is being co-created at this moment and that is supported by the Higher Education Innovate initiative and the European Universities Alliances to help higher education institutions in their ambition to become more entrepreneurial, turning their campus into innovation ecosystems. So to conclude, I would like to remind that all these initiatives and actions are a first step. However, they are not enough. As the 2 reports that we are discussing today point out, we need to join forces to make Europe the global powerhouse for startups. With this in mind, it is up to the new generation of innovators to seize the opportunity to build this pan-European innovation ecosystem. So again, I welcome those reports and I call upon every one of you to continue to share your views within the European Innovation Council Forum as the informal platform for collective thinking of member states, European institutions, regions, and private stakeholders. Thank you very much for this extraordinary opportunity, and now I'm eager to listen to you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Gabriel. And you know, with an ever-growing tool set, it seems to be the right time for us right now to really push forward. We've seen so many years of consultations, manifestos, of so many things said and repeatedly said by the community, but it feels like now we finally have the momentum. Thank you very much for your words, and we'll hear from you again in a few minutes, sorry. Thank you. We are on next with a format that I find to be extremely interesting. We're going to see the current, the next, and the one after that Secretary of States of their respective countries and their presidency of the European Council of the European Union. So I will welcome to stage the Secretary of State of Digital Transition, André Aragão de Azevedo. André, join me here.
Thank you. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, André.
How are you?
How are you? And virtually joining will be joining us the Slovenian State Secretary of the Ministry of Economic Development and Technology, Simon Saj, as well as from France, the Secretary of State for Digital Transition and Electronic Communications, Cedric O. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Now, this is an interesting format. It's a trio talk, so we're going to start with André Azevedo. André, the stage is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Simon. Let me start by greeting Commissioner Maria Gabriel, as well as my colleagues of panel, Cedric from France and Simon from Slovenia. It's a pleasure to be here and to listen to the important message that Commissioner Maria Gabriela just left us. I feel the need to somehow make a point of situation on so many initiatives that during our presidency we were able to testimony and to somehow make a point of clarification on where we are and what we expect from the near future. I believe there is a strong consensus on the fact that entrepreneurship is a very, very strong driver of this recovery plan, as well as from a transition to a new model of economy that we all want to promote to make sure that the economic growth of Europe is even stronger in the medium and long term. It's pretty clear for all of us the challenge we have ahead, whether we want to be the playground for others or whether do we want to be the global leaders. And we have a challenge because when we look into the figures and we are sharing them in this momentum, it's pretty clear that when we compare to the most relevant stakeholders, we are lagging behind, like Commissioner Maria Gabriel just stated. In fact, when we look into the numbers of startups or employees or even the ecosystem value, we easily conclude that Europe is lagging behind. This is a fact, especially when we look into the numbers of the USA, Singapore, of Israel. To please the next slide. It's also important to clarify that when we look into this need of convergence, there was already a very important political sign from the 27 member states of the European Union. In fact, we were able to sign the Startup Nation Standard Declaration. That was a huge step in aligning the different perspectives of the 27 member states and to make sure that we have this common ground, this common framework of intentions and objectives that cover areas like the importance of creating a startup in a very fast, in a day, for example, or to attract and retain talent, to make sure that we are the taxation of stock options is made in the same way, that there is no dumping in the fiscal area. We must make sure that we are able to innovate in terms of regulation and also from the procurement point of view and also from funding or from protecting our democratic values. Obviously never forgetting the importance of digital first. But it's important also to make sure that this consensus is not only from the political side, it's also from the ecosystem and from the different stakeholders. The documents that we are presenting today, this Next Innovation EU and the second document or report, Challenging EU Institutions and Member States, they are very important contributors from the stakeholders that are on a daily basis on the field, making a difference and identifying the main blockers and the difficulties we are still challenging. And if we are able to overcome them, probably we will become much, much more competitive. And we're talking about topics like the deep tech leadership or the innovation cohesion or the data and the definitions or the talent topic or even the policy making strategy. But we have also other contributions. We can identify the example of last week's in Paris, when we were able to get a much better knowledge about this important initiative from the French government, Scale Up Europe, a very important contribution to the discussion about 4 important axes. We talked about funding, about talent, about also deep tech, and obviously about corporate VCs and the connections with startups. So I believe that if it's clear and we are pretty much aligned in terms of diagnosis and also from a political perspective, we are now in the moment that we need to act. This is time for action. We need tangible results. And that's why we believe we need someone on the field and together with the member states and with the stakeholders that is able to somehow put in the material, make it real and materialize all these contributions and start operating and making them tangible. We were able to announce the creation of this Europe Startup Nations Alliance that was announced on the Digital Day and on 19 March 2021, and we expect it to have in operations still in 2021. And basically what we expect the mandate we are counting on this new structure to do is basically to respond to the different topics that I have just mentioned. We expect it to develop a very important data platform that will, on a real-time basis, gather the information from each member state. We need strong data to support strong policies, and we expect it to be the collection platform of information from all of us, and at the same time to give the right evidence of the size and scale of the EU startup ecosystem. At the same time, we need a much better network of entities that, together with the national bodies, with the European Commission, and also with the member state politicians, we are able to involve all the stakeholders and all the member states. And obviously, this will contribute to a stronger brand that will be much, much better recognized internationally to make sure that we have the growth that we all want Europe to have. And in terms of governance and operating model, I would like to highlight the importance of involving all member states and all stakeholders. On the left, you can see that we expect to have representatives from all the 27 member states, and the representation should be made through the national bodies that in each member state treat about the topic of startups, of entrepreneurship. We also expect to have an advisory board that should have a specific focus on the needs and the requests and the topics that are raised by the different stakeholders, like the ones that we have just mentioned this morning, from unicorns, from normal founders, from incubators, from national bodies, from venture capitalists, as well as from corporate VCs. And finally, we expect on the supervisory board, that is supposed to be the most executive body, that we should have a rotational seat representation from each member state aligned with the presidency of the European Union Council. And obviously there will be an operations strategy and platform that will be supporting these three bodies. Finally, to conclude, I believe that we are really on the beginning of this new cycle. There is this political consensus, there is a signed declaration that formally creates the ground for collaboration in between the 27. We have unicorns, we have national bodies, and we have governments and all the entities and stakeholders aligned, and we have this new body that can be and make a difference in terms of this new cycle, the Europe Startup Nations Alliance, ESNA. So I believe we have all the conditions to make Europe a startup continent, and please make sure that you participate, you get involved in this, so that we can make sure that magic does happen in Europe. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you, Andre. Simon Sach, I hope I say your last name right. Oh, yeah, I'm not sure. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
The first name was...
You know, speaking from experience, this Portuguese presidency of the EU Council was quite the activity. There's a lot coming. So you have a few days until your presidency starts. Are you excited?
We are very excited and ready for our presidency. It's less than 14 days and we are looking forward to it.
That's good to hear. Now, in between France and the Portuguese presidency, give us your take on how you think we will be able to not just reach tech sovereignty, which of course is the big topic when we talk about startups, innovation and technology, but also funding startups, being from a smaller country, a smaller member state. How are you going to get your founders excited to scale and become unicorns in the end?
Yeah, let me first say that I am delighted to take part in this discussion today that puts the innovation and competitiveness of Europe at the heart of our future. I must say that the recent crisis showed that speeding up innovation and entrepreneurship is essential to solve the challenges of the new era. Startups and scale-ups operating in the areas of climate change, cybersecurity, sustainable energy, healthy food, and biotech are on the verge of making a big breakthrough. Technology transfer, accelerators, and adequate funding for ventures are the basis of making Europe a leader in global tech and innovation. Assuring access to capital in all stages of growth, especially in the late stage, should be our #1 priority. This is especially important now when the EU decided on the twin transition that will require huge investments. Investments in research and integrating scale-ups into global value chains and help them in entering foreign markets is also a key issue. Dear colleagues, in the field of financial sources and investments, I have to mention the existing fund of venture capital for fast-growing companies in our region, the so-called CEFOF, in which Slovenia in 2018 joined forces with Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia. The EIF entered the fund as a main co-investor and as a lead manager. This model can be good practice for cross-border cooperation of venture funds in Europe. Moreover, Slovenia is in the process of establishing the so-called Slovene Scale-Up Fund. This will be even more focused on scale-up companies, again, in cooperation with the IEF for further financial support for scale-ups. We would be happy to collaborate closely with other EU member states and stakeholders on this specific project too. Through fund, we aim to ensure a seed and venture capital in all stages of growth, from early to scale-up stage. The fund will receive a public financing Private investors are expected to add at least 30% private financing. Second, we should build on a thriving ecosystem and make it more collaborative. Knowledge triangle partnerships, the so-called EIT kicks, are already showing results. The idea on small valleys networks, as proposed in the position paper, has interesting aspects. We should strive for a strong, tightly connected and dynamic cross-border partnerships to overcome a fragmented European innovation landscape. All our actions should lead to a greater territorial convergence of the EU. We should run a vertical startup and scale up that addresses specific challenges in industries. Links between startups and cooperates should intensify and become systemic. We should attract more institutional investors, promote cross-border collaboration of business angels and institutional investors, stimulate the competent fund managers, cut the red tape, and provide tax incentives. Third, we should take advantage on the existing policies, programs, projects, and mechanisms in the EU and national level. The national recovery and resilience plans offer an enormous opportunity to speed up the recovery process by massive investments in green and digital transition. In addition, the Horizon Europe, the EIC pilot, and other EU-managed programs should be further exploited. Last, let's not forget about talent. We have to do everything in our power to ensure the availability of homegrown talent and attract resourceful individuals from outside the EU, for example, via tech and startup visas. Slovenian presidency is starting, as I said, in less than 2 weeks. We will be fully committed to ensure enough discussions and collaboration among the member states and stakeholders on the issue I've just mentioned. The documents, action plan to make Europe the new global powerhouse for startups, the Scale Up Europe manifesto, and the next Innovation EU paper are very concrete in proposing what we should do to achieve a breakthrough in positioning EU enterprises in the global scale. In October this year, Slovenia is planning to organize a high-level event on startups and scale-ups as a follow-up of activities started under the Portuguese and French colleagues. The aim would be to continue activities in the frame of Scale Up Europe manifesto and to make a step closer in building global tech leaders in Europe. This could be a chance to continue our today's discussion and take stock of where we are and how to move forward. Let me conclude by saying we are going in the right direction, but several challenges remain. Those challenges are not easy, but we can overcome them by moving fast, adopting quickly and working together. During the presidency, Slovenia will remain an active supporter of this process by agitating for a resilient Europe together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your intervention there, Mr. Saj. And it is my honor now to receive the Secretary of State in France, Cédric O. Mr. O, it's been quite the show last week. I was happy to be there. I was at the Élysée. It cannot go unnoticed that President Emmanuel Macron is actually putting his full weight behind the findings of the Scale Up Europe report. And, you know, in light of the three of you, the presidencies that we see, could you give us an outlook into your glass ball on what you expect 2022 to look like from your perspective?
Yes, thank you very much, Simon, and hello to both Commissioner Maria Gabriel and André and Simon. That we, as you mentioned, we were all together last week for that Scale Up Europe event. That was really thrilling, I would say, by seeing all those entrepreneurs, investors, corporate members, and institutions that were coming together in order to work on that issue of scaling up Europe as far as the tech ecosystem is concerned. I think that what we heard last week was all about how we create a European brand in terms of innovation, and the European area as far as startup is concerned. We all have our national initiative. So far, we've all had our national initiative, but how do we come together in order to create that brand? And I do think that Europe and France was part of that, has been laying a great emphasis over the past months on regulation, both the DSA, the DMA regulation on AI. But what we see all over the world, that there is a very fierce competition as far as innovation is concerned, and we have to be able to be on a par with our competitors, friends but competitors, Chinese friends and competitors, and American friends and competitors, as far as the innovation is concerned. And I do believe that to this regard, the work that has been done by the Portuguese presidency is really of huge importance on two specific aspects that André has been tackling. The first one is standards. We all know that our competitiveness is depending on, to some extent, on national policies in terms of taxation, in terms of immigration, as far as taxation is concerned, especially in terms of stock option taxation, which we know is so important if we want to our startups to grow. And I do believe that the standards that were put on the table by the Portuguese presidency are of very big importance insofar as they see the horizon to which we should converge if we want to build that startup continent that we want to see emerge. Second initiative that I really want to endorse is the Europe Startup Nation Alliance. I do believe that we need a permanent body that is obviously alongside the Commission, but also not depending on the political reset within the member state, that is taking care of the relationship between the startups in Europe and the European countries and member states and the Commission. And I do believe that this is a very, very important initiative that France will be happy both to endorse and to take part to. That will help build that framework within Europe. And I want to endorse too the issues that were tackled by Simon, especially two of them. The first one is financing, the second one is talent. And that is what we saw in that Scale Up Europe manifesto, is that financing is really important. We need a startup, we need our startup to grow, but if we want also our startup to grow on the long term, we need a financing ecosystem that is at the level of the challenge and that can feed the growth of our startup. And we are lagging behind in terms of financing. So we should accelerate on the integration of the capital market in Europe, but we should also work together with the EIF in order to make emerge those big venture capital funds that will help our startup to grow. And I want to, and France will definitely work with the Slovenian presidency in order to help those that financing ecosystem to emerge. And last thing that I want to tackle, because this is really important, all the competition that we see unfold is a competition about talent. If we want the best company to be here, we need the best talent to be here. We are already training the best talent here, but to some extent we are too often exporting them. So we have to keep them here and attract talent from everywhere in the world. There is this idea of European tech talent, tech visa for talent that has been emerging during the Scale Up Europe manifesto, which I think it's not so easy to design, but we should go in that way, because if we're able both to build on the quality of living here in Europe, especially after the pandemic, if we're able to design that European brand about innovation and to say to every talent in the world that there is a fast track to land here, every innovative company in the world, that it could go through a European fast track tech visa, it could be a huge message sent to the world saying that Europe wants to be at the table of those who are counting among the biggest continent in terms of tech. And I do believe that if we have that, I mean, a permanent body, standards, financing initiative, and initiative for talent, then this might be a game changer.
It's fantastic to see that it seems, you know, the usual European conundrum where fractalization is part of the biggest problem. There seems to be a unified approach here. There seems to be the idea that we have a tool set we need to know, we know what to deploy in order to be more successful. In the sake of time, I want to ask each of you the same question. I think if it comes to mandate, if it comes to doing some of the things that are mentioned inside every one of the reports we're looking at, and especially as well the two ones we're looking at today that the cabinet of Commissioner Gabriel has executed, has presented or has asked for. If we are looking at the multiple ministries involved, how are we going to make sure that the suggestions and the things that need to be done in order to have a quantum leap will be able to be implemented? And I'll start with you, Cedric, and then we'll go around for a quick intervention on this question.
Well, I'll be very brief. I think that for instance, I take the example of the tech visa as far as Europe as a whole is concerned. We all know that this is complicated because there are a lot of ministries involved and a lot of countries. I do think that we have to begin with the countries that are ready to go for that initiative, not maybe at 27, and then the gravity will make the other come. So what I suggest is that with Simon, with André, we gather around us all the countries that want to take part to those kind of initiative, and well, make progress in with those who are the pioneer, and then build something from that. We have to be able to go fast and to go at scale. So let's do that at the beginning with those who are ready to do that now, and the other will come. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sach, you're on mute. Famous words of 2021. There you are. Hello.
Yeah, I must say that we all know already that this is not going to be easy, and because it is not easy already, we are lagging behind the United States and China. It is obvious that many ministries cover this topic, and even in our own countries, it takes time to make progress. And when we talk about cooperation between member states, that's going to take even a bit more time. But since we are aware that action needs to be taken now, and when that awareness kicks in, the development really begins. So I am now confident that although this is a complex topic covered by many ministries in a different way, that we see that time has run out, and action is needed, and this is already the consequences of that awareness. The action is happening.
Thank you. And lastly to you, André, give us your 5 cents. How can we make this happen?
Well, first of all, I would highlight the importance of the continuing strategy. It's important that beside the fact that we need to rotate the seats in the presidency, we must make sure that political priority stays in place, and that we cannot discontinue and somehow change our priority in this area. The second thing is an advantage, a competitive advantage that I believe Europe has to show to the world, which are our values. I believe that all the world also looks to Europe. Although we are lagging a little bit behind in terms of startups, we are much ahead of every other geography in terms of values, in terms of recognition for the importance of respect for individual rights, for democratic values. And this is an asset that I believe we haven't been able to monetize enough. So I think we should somehow make this our flagship and our value proposition, together with all the other initiatives that we are putting in place.
Thank you so much. In a few seconds, we will hear the final remarks on this talk from Commissioner Gabriel. Hello, can I
react?
No.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much, dear André, dear Simon and Cedric. I listened very carefully to you. if I have to choose two sentences, I think that after this discussion, we can say that it's all about coming together and it's time for action. So I very much like, Andre, what you said since the beginning, that we need to preserve the ecosystem approach. For sure, entrepreneurship is an essential driver, not only for the recovery, but for our European leadership. I very much like the link that you made with the 8 best practices for growth-friendly environment. We need really to stay focused on what was already achieved and how now we can build on these excellent starting point and to see them as a solid base. For sure, we have now a renewed ambition. We need to continue to work in order to have a data platform, to have a real network involving all European member states, regions, and all ecosystem leaders. And I very much that you endorse so strongly this idea to have our European brands. Thank you, Cedric. I think that it's very, very clear that that's up to us now to join forces and to see how we can affirm this European brand. Simon, thank you very much. It's very encouraging for the Slovenian presidency how you find the right balance between ambition and pragmatism. I think that here we have a lot of very concrete examples on which we should continue to think how to scale up them at European level. You mentioned the Scale Up Fund. I think that it's really important to see how at European level we can bring the benefits of this experience to the others. I fully agree that we need to work on venture funds in all stages of growth. And thank you very much for raising again the importance of one of the ideas of Unicorn Group, the small valleys, because I think that we definitely need to tackle the fragmentation. We need to work for the innovation cohesion. And that's why, Cedric, I like very much this idea for European Tech Visa. And it's a very pragmatic point of view to start with some member states because maybe others are not ready. But I think that especially because we are talking about innovation, the usual suspects will be not those for which we think spontaneously. So I think that it will be very important not to reproduce some of the errors of the past because R&I divide is a fact in Europe. And if you'd like to form a European leadership, that will be important to bring on board as much as possible. And that's why here my remark is to look attentively to the resilience and recovery facility plans, because almost all our member states have submitted their plans. And in some of them, we have very concrete proposals to go in this direction. So I think that it will be crucial to look at this in 2 months when all the procedure will be finished and to identify already critical mass of reforms, proposals, investments in order to build on this idea and to see how we can achieve it. Thank you very much for raising again the importance of talents, dear Cedric. It's something very close to my heart. Yes, on one side, maybe with the narrative not to keep them in Europe, but to offer them the possibility to choose Europe as their home for growth, for the realization of their projects and ideas, and of course to see how we can attract the best talents. And that's why we definitely here need to build on our Europeans' richness in diversity and strength in collaboration. Finally, what I would like to say is that, yes, at the heart of all these proposals, Andre, you are right, we need to promote the added value of our European approach on these questions, and that's exactly because we have values. And I think that we should continue in this direction. So thank you very much for raising again the importance of our ambition, but the importance of our pragmatism, to insist on the cooperation, to insist on ecosystem approach, to address the diversity and the talents, to stay very strategic where we have our chances, real chances to affirm our leadership because we have strengths, and to tackle our weaknesses because now everyone is on board. We have Unicorns Group, we have innovation ecosystem leaders, we have startups, we have member states. So again, thank you very much for raising awareness how important it is to seize the momentum, a momentum for a European moment. And that's, for me, the opportunity that we have with innovation.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Gabriel, for your closing remarks on this session. It's been a pleasure to have you as always, and it's fantastic to see the alignment already here today. And I can only hope we can grow the base for this alignment and get into gear and get into action to, get to the next stage. Thank you so much. In a few seconds, ladies and gentlemen, we will hear from the co-founder of Angry Birds and Slush, Peter Westerbecker. Peter will be right with you.
Yes, so great to be here, and I really enjoyed listening to the previous discussion. So I think that we're onto something here, clearly. And maybe to start with, I think that what is really fantastic about the situation that we're in right now is that we have everything we need. And I always talk about education, entrepreneurship, and entertainment. And maybe I should add a fourth E there, Europe. And Europe can actually lead in all of these areas. And I think that that is something that we shouldn't be shy about what we've achieved so far in Europe. And we're always, and we also discussed today that, we're behind the US, we're behind China. I would actually argue that we are not, but we're also very good at being a bit modest about our achievements here in Europe. And I think that we have a lot to offer, and we are already doing a lot. But of course, we can never be kind of like satisfied with the current status quo. We can do a lot better. And I think that if you look at education, I mean, I don't think anybody would argue against the fact that we are a leading continent when it comes to education. A lot of young people every year come to Europe because they want to build a better future by having fantastic education. We have fantastic universities, and there is a high correlation between the university density and then the number of success stories, startups, unicorns, you name it. And here we are in a very good position as Europe. So I think that is kind of like a good start. And also, if you look at education and the successful startup ecosystems, of course, everybody knows we look at like Silicon Valley, Stanford, Berkeley. That's kind of like where it all started. In fact, Bill and Dave that I had a chance to meet when I was working at HP, kind of like the original tech startup, if you will. Their first building was on the Stanford University campus. So there's always been a close collaboration between the universities and the innovators and the startups and everything. So I think that that is something that we can do much better also here in Europe, making sure that our universities are okay with working with the companies, with the private sector, with the startups, to really get the innovation out there to the people. I think that is something that is very, very important. But then talking about universities, I was actually in China, so we talk about China a lot before the pandemic, and then I was listening to a presentation from a professor from Tsinghua University, and he was very, very happy, very, very proud that, hey, China has created more than 200 unicorn companies. A lot of them have actually popped up around Tsinghua, which is one of the leading universities in China and actually one of the leading universities in the world. And of course, 200 unicorns, that's fantastic. And it's not higher than, like Silicon Valley, but it's really like a very, very big number. But then at the same time, if you then start doing the math, look at our friends in Estonia. They have created 7 unicorn companies. Okay, it's not 200, but then you also have to take into account that our friends in Estonia, it's a population of 1.3 million. And if you do the math, it means that you need less than 200,000 people in Estonia to create a unicorn. And China, 200 unicorns, but also 1.4 billion population. So it means that you need 7 million people to create a unicorn in China. So the efficiency that we see in Estonia is far, far ahead of anything that you've seen in China or even Silicon Valley. So you could argue that we're already leading, in parts of Europe, we're already leading the world if you look at metrics like unicorns per capita. And then if you translate this Estonian number, and let's take, for example, Germany, that would mean that we would have 444 unicorns in Germany, 370 in France, and here in Finland, where I'm right now, we should have 30. And we're actually going to have that, I'm sure, in 5, and if not in 5 years, in 10 years. And I think that we need to look at these kind of success stories across Europe. And then, that brings me from education to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs, we are people who do things. And in Europe, we have been very good at creating a lot of reports and plans and fantastic programs. But then I think that the doing part is something that we need to get to now. And that's why I'm like super happy to be here today and listening to the presentations and the talks here. I think that we're now getting to the doing part, and that is where we need the entrepreneurs. And I think that it's really, really important that we have a close collaboration with the public sector in all the European nations and make sure that we get, the governments and the bureaucracy out of the way so that entrepreneurs, startups, and the future unicorns can do their thing. I think that is like really, really important because we have everything we need here to make things happen. And I also then, with a background in like games and entertainment and all of that, I always talk about this triple E model. So we have education, we have entrepreneurship, we also have entertainment. I mean, people, we are always competing for people's attention and time. And I think that we have a lot to offer here in Europe. We actually have fantastic cities, we have fantastic places to live. So a lot of people want to be in Europe. And I really think that we should focus on this, tech visa and making sure that the people, the future unicorn founders, the future startup founders, they should come here. And this is where you can build, your fantastic company, your fantastic startup. So we need to make sure that we roll out the red carpet and welcome these, future leaders, future founders. We bring them here and we tell them that this is where you can build, the finest future for yourself and for your family. And we can offer, a really fantastic lifestyle. And you have a lot of different areas, a lot of diversity across Europe. So we are not all the same. And that is actually a strength. Sometimes we see that as weakness, that, we have all of these, challenges, different languages and cultures and all of that. But hey, guess what? That is a fantastic offering that very few places on the planet can offer. So again, let's turn, strength in or weakness into a strength in this area. So, we are Europe and we can lead. When I've been throwing around these numbers, taking, like the Estonian success and then mapping that to Europe, then I was told that, but Peter, that would mean that we would be better than the US, we would be better than China. And here again, of course, why wouldn't we be better? I don't think that there is any reason why we shouldn't be much more ambitious. And of course, we can lead. We don't need to follow. And I think that this is in many areas, we think that we are, way behind. I heard Singapore and Israel and these places mentioned, but hey, guess what? We're already way ahead, but we just need to look at it in a bit different way. And maybe, here to wrap up, one thing that what we did over here in our part of the world, this northern corner of the EU, some people think that it's, like a bit cold, dark. Sometimes there's like slush on the ground. Actually, not today. It's like almost 30 degrees. So we also have like our warm summer days, like once a year or something like that. But anyway, some people might think that that is, a disadvantage. But we took that and we turned it into advantage. So when everybody else was doing what I would call these wannabe Silicon Valley events, everybody wants to be the Silicon Valley of this, Silicon Valley of that. We decided that, okay, we're going to organize like an event in November when it's certainly cold, it's certainly dark, and there's even like some slush on the ground. So we created this slush event. And when you land here in Finland in November, I guarantee you that you realize immediately that it's not the Silicon Valley. And we decided actually to make it much, much better. than Silicon Valley. And I think this is the ambition that we should be having here in Europe, that again, you can't lead by following. There's fantastic activity happening in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of activity in China. There's a lot of innovation happening all over the planet. But again, we can definitely, as Europe, we can lead. We need to pull our strengths together. And if some nations want to move faster, so be it. But I think that competition is a wonderful thing to have, also between nations and areas and regions and cities and everything. So why not turn that diversity and turn this European way of doing things into something unique? And I think that we're already doing things in a very unique way. So again, let's not be afraid of setting ambitious targets. And I think in the next 5 years, we can definitely do, let's say, do a 5x, but in 10 years, we can do a 10x in the number of startups, in the number of unicorns, in the numbers invested into startups, because guess what? When you have the best startups, the money will come. So again, of course, as investors, no matter if you're sitting in Silicon Valley, you're sitting on the East Coast of the US, or you're sitting in Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Tokyo, wherever, what do you want to do as an investor? You want to invest in the best startups. And you will invest in Europe because that's where the best startups, that's where the future unicorns are hanging out. And we'll hear from many of the successful unicorns later today. And I think that there's many, many more European unicorns in the making. So right now, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. That's what us entrepreneurs do. And we need to get more entrepreneurship into the EU. And I think that that's something that we're going to make happen no matter what. So thank you very much, and let's get to work.
Peter, you always leave me with emotion of excitement and that we can actually get this done. I love that. It's fantastic. When I look at I'm just going to ask you one quick question. We have a little bit more time, and having you here is fantastic. So, if you compare the approaches, sometimes we see a bottom-up approach. We need more startups. We need more entrepreneurship. Sometimes we see a top-down approach where it's all about cutting the red tape for the billion-dollar company club. What's your take on that? I mean, the metric of unicorns per capita, I love it, but it is also aiming at the very top segment. Would you agree that we also need a ton more founders, that we need more people to try to take the risk? What's your take on the two different approaches, bottom up or top down? Where should we start?
So I think that it's not either or, it's really like and. We need both. I think that that's very important. But I think that the only way to create sustainable change is to engage the young people. So I really believe in grassroots. And this is something that I think has been behind the success. If you look at what's been happening here in Northern Europe, I think that it's all about the young people, putting the young people in charge. I think that is absolutely vital. But as part of that, what I always say that it's our job, for us, like slightly older people, to make sure that we keep the governments and the old people out of the way while the young people change the world and Europe. So I think that we really need to focus in the top down in empowering the young people and getting out of the way, letting them get their job done. And I'm talking about young people who are already in Europe, but also the young people that want to come here because they want to build a better life for themselves and they want to build a better Europe. So I think that that is something that I really, really think that we need to work on that, and we should welcome founders. If you look at all the startup hotspots anywhere in the world, what they have in common is that most of the companies, they have been started by people who were not there. They were not born there. They moved there because they wanted to change the world. They wanted to build a better life. They wanted to build their startup. And I think that this is something that we can offer in Europe, and we need to make sure that we don't turn people away. We actually need to welcome the future founders. We need to welcome them to our universities. We need to support them, and we need to get the red tape out of the way. But I don't think that the red tape ever stopped anybody. I mean, look at many of the markets around the world. Governments have been very unsuccessful in stopping entrepreneurs from creating successful companies, no matter where you go. So I think that again, we need both, and that's also why events like this are fantastic. And having, Commissioner Gabriel now having, like the education, I think Erasmus, fantastic program for enabling this future growth of Europe and enabling the entrepreneurs to get their job done. So again, let's do both and let's work together.
Fantastic. The glass is always half full, and let's get going, right? Thank you so much for joining us today, Peter. Glad to see you. See you again soon. Take care.
Absolutely. Yeah, you too.
We are here today because we have seen two reports. One report, as we will hear more about later, is collected from the opinions and the intelligent, brilliant minds of unicorn founders all across Europe. A second report was taken and sourced from the ecosystem leaders, such as associations and do tanks, which are empowered by the government to work on the behalf of startups. On this report, which was structured around 4 key topics, talent, definitions and data, ecosystems, and policy, I am very honored today to welcome some of the co-authors of the report. First off, I will invite everyone to join this panel. We have Konstantin van Oranje from TechLeap. We have David Hanf from Deutsche Startups. Heidi Cenan, again, I'm going to ask you if I said this right. We'll find out in a second, from the Croatian AI Association. We have Matej Rus from Startup Slovenia and Marta Pavlak from Startup Poland. Welcome, everybody. Now, I'd like to start with you, Konstantin, not just in alphabetical order, but just because. And I would like to know, if you are looking at this report, is there an area of action from the 4 I've mentioned that you would put a stronger emphasis on?
Wow. Yeah, I think some of the points were raised in the previous session. I think giving a lot of empowering the young and focusing on talent is going to be massively important. And maybe we're still in a point where we're looking a lot at financing. So obviously we want cross-border funding, so larger VC funds and all that. But then really rapidly after that comes talent. So Europe must remain the space where the best talent of the world and most ambitious talent of the world wants to go and wants to stay and build their businesses. So I think that's really important. It's also very political, so that we understand that we as a continent have to stay open to people, and that the people are actually going to make the difference, and that we have to put them at the center.
The Netherlands has always been fantastic at attracting and retaining talent, I believe. I mean, I've always been excited to travel to the Netherlands. Amsterdam is a fantastic city to visit. I haven't been working there for a longer time, but maybe asking you, maybe I'm wrong. You could tell me that I'm wrong and I wasn't right about what I just said, but thinking that you have worked with visa programs for the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, and worked on this talent acquisition and retention theme. What worked, what didn't work, and what would you think is very important there for Europe to do on a broader scale?
Well, I mean, we know we've not been leading really in terms of, say, options, salary options and the fiscal treatment of options. I think France and the UK and now I think Germany are doing much better, and we've been pushing a lot, and we will be getting better rules soon. But that's definitely something you have to get right, and we know about that, and we've talked about that a lot. Then about the visa, there's a tendency with governments to be very incremental in this, and then allow a little bit more. For instance, we had startup visa for the founder. The founder needs to bring his team or her team, and the partner should come along as well, and they should be able to work. So you have to, once you take the first step and say it's important to get startups to come to your country, you have to think about, okay, what's the implication? And you have to be generous. And that's not always easy. So that would be another step where we haven't been very good, and we're actually now trying to do much more. And then obviously you have to have an environment where people want to be. And there's always a thing about critical mass of talented people. So the places where there's a critical mass of interesting companies to go to, you want to have alternatives. So for instance, there might be Google might be there, or it might be Netflix, or we have, for instance, Uber with a lot of developers, and those people will leave the company at some time and want to set up their own companies or want to work with a startup. So you need to have that kind of critical mass. And what helps also is if you have corporates that are very active in engaging startups. So that means that again, the people that are in this ecosystem can circulate between jobs, between challenges, and then what you want obviously is that when they have options then and their company does well, that they want to stay there, want to reinvest, start a new company, and all of that, you know, really also needs the support of local governments to make it happen.
Yeah, of course. And we've had our own experiment programs here in Portugal where we had a talent visa where you attract people coming in. At the same time, startup visa, you can have founders excited to try and found a company. And, you know, today we're trying to sort of get a little bit of an overview of all the things that are happening in Europe and how this report actually came to fruition. And I want to ask Heidi. Heidi, I mean, you know, Croatian AI Association, we always consider the East to be so full of technical talent and possibly deep tech, but it also has become sort of a near-sourcing, outsourcing area. And, you know, I've always seen some of those cities in the East when I visited as full of tech talent, but not so much yet of tech startups. It was always very strong on the technical side, less so on the entrepreneurial side. From your experience, have you delivered programs? Are you in the process of delivering programs to change that?
Well, things are changing, not necessarily because of specific programs or because of the fostering startup ecosystem, because unfortunately in Croatia that is almost non-existent. But on the other hand, we do have an amazing number of companies that have had tremendous successes in the past, not even 12 months, that are actually bringing the wave of change. So yes, as you said, Croatia has been known as part of the many countries in East Europe as a sort of an outsourcing country of good talent to other companies. But now slightly that is changing, and there are more and more founders founding their own companies and also founding the product companies. So I dare say we're like riding on a wave of now Infobip and Rimac that have become Croatian unicorns. Well, Rimac's almost a unicorn, but it's getting there. And then we are having other companies that have had crazy investments, that have had crazy exits. And what we've seen and what we've heard also from Konstantin and Peter is that now those companies are also like inspiring people to stay here, not only to stay here, but also to come, whether back to Croatia, because now we are also seeing a wave of experts and talents that have been working for large companies somewhere abroad that are now coming back to Croatia to work for those Croatian startups. And we are also seeing a wave of attracting people from other countries to come and work here. So like I said, it's not really a set program. I do hope that with this initiative, and not just this, but all the initiatives that are happening right now, that also our government will recognize the importance of startups and that they will, to put it diplomatically, they will show the effort and do the effort to actually set something in place.
Okay, yeah, diplomacy is the name of the game today. I think there's a lot of things, you know, we could say that over the last years we've spoken to politicians on all levels about rather similar things, about rather comparable things, employee stock option programs, the definition of what a startup is. Deep tech, you're from the Croatian AI Association. That's a very specific focus, and I don't think there's any other European country that has a specific AI association. I could be wrong, I don't Yeah, I'm wrong. I'm completely wrong. Of course I am. It's not my deep tech in AI. AI is not my core topic. But tell me, how did that come about? I wouldn't have expected that necessarily from Croatia. How did that come about, and how many founders and entrepreneurs do you see there? Is that a race that we're still actively involved in from Europe?
Absolutely. I mean, again, we do have amazing talent. And as I said, there's a wave of people starting companies and especially in this field now. So the Croatian AI Association is one of the national associations across Europe. I think almost every country has it. However, we joined this initiative because we don't have a national startup association. So this was the closest thing to it because we have a lot of startups within the association. We actually did kind of an AI landscape 6 months ago, and we've been able to identify around 70 startups back then, and the number is growing that are focusing solely on AI. So it started by self-organizing, and that is one thing that we are good at here. And there are a lot of associations that are really bringing people together to really try to make a push towards a better ecosystem and push towards the government again to enable a lot of those action points that we've mentioned in the action plan. So we are also trying to push from this side towards just our government. And then, of course, hopefully we will have the push from the EU on our government as well. Because we realized that if we wanted to put Croatia on the map of AI in the world, that we need to really join our forces and bring our, show that we are here, that we are present. So it kind of started right before the pandemic, unfortunately, and it was during the Croatia's EU presidency. That was at the beginning of last year. But we've had some amazing events that are happening, and we've started the European AI Forum together with the associations from France and Germany, that are national AI associations, and we've had many other AI associations from other countries join. So there is a lot of the things and topics that are being covered that are specifically AI related, but also very much startup related, because if we are talking about startups that are drivers of the innovations, and especially if we are talking about deep tech, then AI is one of the fields that is very much involved there.
Indeed, and I remember, I think it was an investor from Asia saying that just simply because the European landscape is not unified in language, that we've already lost the race for AI, and that we're not even in the bronze running. But you would disagree from all I hear now. You're a lot more, enthusiastic about it.
Absolutely, no. I would dare to disagree. Maybe, okay, we do have some hurdles that have to do a lot with the red tape, unfortunately, and the regulation that maybe is making it a bit harder for startups to really thrive and to scale. But that does not mean that the race is lost. On the contrary, we are seeing amazing success stories and amazing startups that are coming, and that we see them as very much future unicorns, even from Croatia. And when you put that across Europe, then many, many more are coming as well.
Fantastic. I want to go on to Mate and see Slovenia. You're rather close, and it's for me always interesting to hear from the smaller member states. Please don't get offended. I'm working here from Portugal. We're also considered to be one of the smaller member states. When your constituency, your companies, the startups that you work with, consider regulation and policy, is there a lot of red tape in comparison to other member states in your home country? Do you work successfully with the government to cut that tape? Give us a little insight on where you guys stand.
Our startup community is quite active, also in approaching the government to improve framework conditions. And in 2017, we sit down and wrote a document with and we tried to identify all the obstacles. And so finally, the obstacles are quite similar to the European obstacles, and it's not. So we did our homework, And then in 2017, our government also decided to start the so-called program, the Slovenia, the country of startups. And, but there are some hurdles that are easy to tackle, and there are some that are not really easy to change. And then when we try to tackle those more challenging ones, like stock options, like visas, like incentives for private investors, then we took a look to other countries. Our officials and politicians, they looked at Germany, at Austria, because we are quite a DACH region oriented, and if Germans have the system, then then is for sure right, But today we heard that Estonia and Finland and Nordics countries are way better than maybe Central European ones, and therefore there was a lot of arguments why not to change something, because others didn't really change it already. So therefore, I'm really eager or really happy that this initiative became like European one initiative, and that we talk about it, because I deeply believe that we in Slovenia, we did our homework. We identified all the obstacles. We have the roadmap, what should be changed, in which laws, but we need a willingness and also common consensus that this is really important. And because we don't have the number of startups, on the EU level, we don't know how many startups are there, what are their contributions, and now we see that everything is becoming more transparent, and I'm really optimistic that in the next years we will be able to change all the regulation needed, and that obstacle will be removed, because our entrepreneurs are really let's say they're really pushing hard. They are really expecting that the government and the society will change the attitude towards startups and scale-ups, and that they will really make our country competitive, and also Europe competitive to other continents.
Yeah, and it seems like we're in a very good moment in time there, because all of this activity seems to boil up. In the past, I have always been in conversations with entrepreneurs. Some years ago, when I started working with the European Commission on some of these consultations and manifestos and everything that we've seen in the past. And many entrepreneurs told me, oh, come on, man, you're wasting your time. Leave me alone with policy. I just want to get my work done. Do you see a change there? Do you see a change in perspective from entrepreneurs to want to engage more with policymakers and to be more active on that front?
Yeah, I think that in Slovenia, especially, our entrepreneurs are really trying to change the system, because they saw they're quite or how to say that our startups were quite US oriented, and then they learn a lot how the system works there, and then they ask themselves, why shouldn't we start the same company in Slovenia under the same regulation? Why we can't make jobs here in Slovenia? And I think that they're quite, that they try to help Slovenia. And sometimes it's a pity to see that some politicians are not really believing, or not just politicians.
Yeah. Marta, Poland, right? I mean, it's a very large economy. I personally, looking at Poland and working with a few Polish entrepreneurs, was extremely surprised. I'm from Berlin, so I was rather close. And coming after the wall came down and after the end of that communist time and Solidarność, there was an extreme spike in entrepreneurship. Warsaw is a bustling city. It has more skyscrapers than Berlin, which I'm really angry about. But so tell me about the Polish ecosystem. How did you get so far in such a short time?
Oh, thank you so much. It's impressive, really, your knowledge of Polish history. Short time, I'm not sure. It took us almost 30 years, to be at this point. And regarding startup ecosystems, maybe it's last 5-6 years that was very crucial. And Polish government and Polish public sector started to look at the startup ecosystem like a whole, like play of many actors. So I think that first of all, of course, involvement of Polish people, of Polish young people, by young I mean people who are started to do innovative things, and combination of people both from corporate that decided to start their own businesses and young people who graduated from universities and decided to do something very innovative, not join another corporations, but run their own startups. But I would like to say a few words from legal perspective. It's always with me because I'm legal counsel, and at Startup Poland I run public policy and legal department. So I think that what is really crucial still, and what took us to this place, is very coherent legal startups friendly ecosystem, because our government started to, we had our own ministry. It was a Ministry of Entrepreneurship. It was run by amazing Milevich. Unfortunately, she is not in our government anymore. But when she took this position 5 years ago, we started to run real concrete dialogue with her. It was business to government dialogue, real dialogue between startups and public sector, and we're able to push many things in the legal system that very positive affects now the business, because at the end of the day, of course, legal regulations are present in daily operations, business daily operations. So, for instance, many tax incentives. We like. Currently, there is IP box, which is special allowance for companies and people who have innovative ideas. They have special lower CIT rate, and it's very important. And we know statistics that it really accelerated the number of startups that started to develop their ideas in Poland. Also, for instance, Estonian tax. This is the new solution that will be enforced at the beginning next year. Also, new public procurement law, and I would like to underline this era of law, because it's very important to make public procurement, in my humble opinion, in opinion of our organization, more friendly to startups. And since the beginning of this year, we have new public procurement law in force that creates special procedures for startups, for innovative companies, and eliminate jointly responsible contractors, for instance, make appeal fees lower, and at the end of the day, definitely have very positive influence on startups. And we already observe, we conduct Startup Poland, we conducted survey, and the survey showed that startups really started to think about public procurement like another source of business to them. So I can multiply these examples. Of course, there is still a lot of work to do. Still, we have to deal with employee stock options, for instance. I know that is like general postulate, and it was underlined in our common document. But in Poland, we have even more problems, because we have legal obstacles with introducing employee stock options in limited liability companies that are the most popular legal form for startups in Poland. So it's very easy to introduce employee stock option in joint liability company, but it's definitely more difficult to do it in limited liability company. But to sum up, our, I think, more and more friendly legal ecosystem that is a part of startups ecosystem, and of course involvement of startup owners and VC funds as key actors of the startups ecosystem.
Very interesting, and also very interesting to have you here speaking with a legal understanding, a legal capacity. I will get back to that a little bit later, because the legal side of startups is something that's intrigued me for a long time. Keywords, definitions. I want to quickly introduce our last member of the panel, David. Hello, David from Germany.
Hi.
Hi, yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Successfully unmuted. Hello, how are you? Great to have you, David. the German Startup Association, Germany being the largest economy inside Europe. I'm German, as you may know, and I've always been kind of struggling with the success of the wider economy in Germany. Germany is so successful that it's always been very challenging for the incumbents to say, we need new rules, we want this, we want that. Many times there's been the, hold on a second, let's not change a running system. Obviously, we're in elections now, in Germany there is elections coming up, so there's not as much possibility and movement as one would hope for or want. But from your perspective, do you see the times changing? Is there the same sort of enthusiasm and excitement as we see from other member states?
There is. So probably there's one or two words I'd like to say more about it. So association has had a great start and always been listened to since its inception in 2009. Around about that time, 2010. However, it has been better and better over the years. There's more and more people, state secretaries, even ministers that know what they're saying. However, when then something like with the ESOP thing happened, Konstantin's remark in the beginning was that that Germany solved ESOP. Unfortunately, the ESOP thing was a failure in my eyes. I'm sorry to be that direct, but the government solved a little small piece, which is nice and puts startups on even into the financial institutions, like the Bundesfinanzministerium. However, they solved not the right thing, which is the much bigger thing. So I personally think now we are in a worse situation because the government might say now, oh, we solved that now, so for 4 to 8 years we don't do anything about ESOP. I hope this doesn't happen, and this ambition to improve the ecosystem even more continues with the new government. But that's an example of why you see that you still have to explain startups, how startups tick, how talent can be attracted, how financing really works. So we're not there yet, but it's definitely much better than it used to be.
Yeah, when I was working on the Startup Nation standard, and then it was all signed, and then shortly after, including the Germans, which were kind of refusing to sign, but then in the end changed their mind. And shortly after, the employee stock option program was updated, where I think 2,000 euros of capital, 2,100 euros or so of capital gains are free and shall not be taxed. Am I right about that? Is that that's where that stands? Something like that?
Isn't it 1,400 euros even only? The thing is, employees have a much worse situation when there's an exit tax-wise compared to founders and investors, and I think that's not fair, right? And as all of the speakers before told me, you need for an ecosystem, you need people that become successful, become entrepreneurs and then serial entrepreneurs, but you also need employees of former startups that found their new company next. Because it's really the startups that you need in order to create an ecosystem, and not the funding and the money. Konstantin put it nicely in saying something about critical mass for a startup ecosystem, right? And you have a bit of a chicken and egg, money, startup, and so on and so forth. If you have to choose, if you want to solve this, you have to create the startup first, and then the money follows. So that's my complete conviction. It's actually also the most important message I think I want to bring across after having read those papers, that it's a lot about creating more and more startups, and then money follows, and then unicorns follow. Of course, you can also do something top down, but I would rather go for the first, if you have to choose.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think now we're everybody's been introduced. Now we're in a good moment to take comments and broaden up the conversation. I see you, Konstantin. Please go ahead. You've raised your hand.
Yeah, I think David raises a good point. We have the same, where the government then does act, but doesn't do as I said, not generous and tries to solve one little problem, but doesn't solve the whole problem, and then you can actually get into worse territory. We had the same. We actually shot down a proposal on stock options that was actually put us in a worse position. That's why there was a delay. And now we are still only halfway, but at least we have one problem solved, and but the tax rate is still too high. It's still rate as income instead of a capital gain, and which is not fair. But it is something we did agree with the government that let's take this step, and then we will work on the next step. So there's kind of, and then maybe that's something also that you can do in Germany. At least discuss and have some kind of a process in place where you say, well, we will be discussing this next step, so that there's at least already some kind of buy-in from either from the government or at a political level to go further, even though that might not be achievable in one step. But we're seeing this as well. We saw it with the visa policy as well. Setting one step and then not leading really to solving the problem is basically like doing nothing. And if the government then has the feeling that they have done everything and now you should shut up, then you have actually achieved a negative result, which we should be aware of. And there, I think Europe comes in by providing a kind of guidance at a European level. You have something you can refer to. You can say, well, look, this is the standard in Europe. So we're not delivering the standard, and I think politicians are quite sensitive to that. If you say that we're not doing as well as our neighbors are doing, and then you can play on that. But that's something Europe can provide us.
It's a bit like creating the fear of missing out, right? You create a standard, everybody is trying to catch up to that standard, and that could be a positive political motivation for people to actually change some of those things according to those standards. Something that's always been, and this is for any one of you, please raise your hand if you want to take this one. Something that's always been interesting me very much is that our current corporate law is from before the digital age. So none of the legislation or rules are from or encompassing what we experience with startups, specifically if we look at early stage. 9 out of 10 companies fail. Well, if I found a company, the tax system, the lawyers, the notary, everybody insinuates success. And that's the furthest from the truth when you actually look at startups. Now, in this consultation and the corresponding report, there was also something around the definition, a legal definition of what a startup is. And as much as I know that the European Commission is actually not so in favor of that, because the definition of what an SME is, I think, created more problems than it solved anything. What's your take? Do you think this is a tool that could actually positively impact and change some of the issues that we see specifically in early stage? Who wants to take this one? All right. Okay, there you go. David, go for it. And then afterward, Marta. Please, David, go ahead.
I think I'll, probably not so legal what I would say, but then Marta can hopefully complement. I think that's not an easy task after even being hard to define a startup from very simple things like younger than 10 years, growing in employees or revenue strongly, and being innovative. That's the definition of this German Startup Association. I think that's the right one, and it's quite open, right? It doesn't have a certain branch. I think it could be a hard time to find a legal definition, so that SME problem might even be stronger. I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I think it's going to be a difficult one.
Oh, for sure. None of this is easy, right? But Marta, please go ahead from your side.
Totally agree with David. I think that, and I'm really speaking as legal counsel right now, because I think that defining what startups can create a lot of problems. We tried to do it in Poland, and we had a lot of brainstorming sessions regarding if we should introduce this legal definition of startups, because in Polish legal system we have definition of SME, of course, and we can observe how many problems it creates for this category of creates being categorized as SMEs. And for instance, if this company wants to achieve something and take something from the legal system. So I think that we have this good practice in dialogue with public sector that in Poland, startup means the company that is innovative and needs financial and mental support. So it's very wide, and I think that currently we are in this position that we shouldn't define startup. We shouldn't introduce definition of startup in a Polish legal system, but if it will come from the Brussels perspective, and it will be introduced in directive or other legal European legal act. We should do it very carefully, and we should do it very wide, because it shouldn't create any obstacles for startups. And as you said before, our legal system in all countries is not following the development of digitalization and business. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think always we're also kind of lacking some of the data, right? I mean, it's always a little bit challenging to talk about startups, and this brings me to the next point there: data and the collection of data, and a proper report and the possibility to report is missing, and it's something that we've all in this consultation said in writing. When it comes to data in your respective ecosystem, how's your landscape? How are you collecting data? Are you collecting data? Are you capable of publishing? Who would like to start? Please go ahead, Konstantin.
Yeah, we started a few years ago. Actually, it was an initiative also from the European Startup Association, or I don't know exactly what it was called, and which we didn't follow. We really looked at frameworks, and we talked to the Israelis as well, and then we decided to go with Dealroom and set up our own, basically our own database, which we share with Dealroom, and we enrich. So we do a lot of very active outreach to startups to make sure it's as complete as possible. So we went from something like 2,500 startups now to 10,000 startups that we've got mapped, and then all the other data that we can comply also through our programs we will add. So, but it's super important to have the data, also to talk to government, to make sure that your organization gets the legitimacy that is needed to be able to speak up to government, because you'll be competing with SMEs and with all kinds of other categories of important economic and societal actors. And if you can say productivity is higher, employment is higher, this is the level, also of unfilled vacancies and these kind of things, makes that you have a much better case for policy in general. So we've been investing a lot in data gathering. We have a team of 4 data experts and lead scientists really to do that. But it's a lot of work, and but there's so much data out there, and there's so much you can get out of also modeling where in your country there clusters are forming around, where technologies and application domains are coming together, and where you see that startups are emerging to grow. And if you can combine that with the investment data as well, then you know where the investment is flowing. And then you can see that there are inconsistencies. For instance, we are seeing a lot of issues around startups not growing into scale-ups, but you can actually see per funding phase exactly where things are not happening and why not. And then you can actually bring it down to funds and individual companies nearly. That really helps you kind of hone into where the problems are. So I think data is massively important. And the more we can also do this at the European level and make sure that we can aggregate the data in an effective way, I think that will help us a lot.
I couldn't agree more. Anyone else of you? Yes, please, Mate, go for it.
I can agree that we are lacking the data, but I can't agree that we don't have like definitions of startups. What are we missing is like the confirmation, or let's say the willingness to have the system to judge who is a startup and who is not. Like the doctors, they have a system to define who is a doctor and who is not. The lawyers, they have the system to define who is a lawyer, who is not a lawyer. So we need somehow, so we in Slovenia, we tackle this challenge in the way that we established, our government put it in the law that we have, that we track the startups with a startup register, and the startups and the founders and the investors are those that are taking a look at a company if it has a potential to be named as a startup, if they have like scalable business model, if they have intentions to grow, and so on. So I do believe that there is nobody that we can solve this issue on the legal, let's say on a statistical level without people's intervention or some intervention because of humans intervention. And I think that's like a sphere that we don't feel comfortable, and I don't really know how we will solve that in the like really in the way that nobody will be able to complain, and that because especially when the money and the special special treatment of startups and scale up will be in place, then there could be a lot of complaints, a lot of and we need to. I would be really happy to have that we would establish like EU-wide like guidelines or standards and procedures how to really distinguish SME companies from startups and scale-ups companies, and to have like permanent screening of if they still are comply with this title, because obviously we can't solve or we can have a regulation for all companies just the same. We need to have some special treatment for startups and scale-ups, but who will be the one to decide who is it and who is not?
A very interesting question there, and I agree there's probably the need for a approach that is similar to the venture capital approach to understanding what a startup is, from angel to seed to Series A. But Heidi, I saw you raise your hand. Please, floor is yours.
Yes, I would just want to continue on what Mate said. Our opinion here is also that it would be actually good to have a definition of startup, because a lot of changes, especially on the legal side, that will need to be implemented would be much easier if you could basically circumvent the changes in the existing laws and practically have a policy framework for startups only. That came from our attempts and actually our efforts between several of our associations here towards the government to bring tax reliefs for angel investors, similar to the SEIS system that is in place in the UK. And when we realized how many hurdles we would run into trying to change the current laws to have that happen, we realized that amazingly enough, it would be much easier simply to have something that applies to startups only, and for that you need a definition. Because for what David said, that we need more, like what's chicken or egg, we need startups, so we need financing. Yeah, we do need a lot more startups to really start the ecosystem, but also it would be much easier to have many more startups if we had the financing in that earliest stage of their development, and that is usually the angel investments. So there is a lot of funds, and there's a lot of people who do have capital that is right now sitting in bank accounts and nothing is happening with it. It would be easier to get that money and really employ it into trying to build something innovative and have a lot more companies that are doing something innovative, and that is helping to strengthen the ecosystem, startup ecosystem, not just in Croatia, but in the EU. So again, just to say that yes, we kind of do feel that the definition would be a good way to go. And of course, after that, to really gather all the data to support the thesis that startups are an important part of the ecosystem. And from what we've heard during our discussions while making the action plan, the colleagues from Estonia have also established a good system of gathering the data, which they're using to really show the importance of the startup ecosystem there.
Yeah, I mean, I do see the challenges of definitions, of course. Anything that you do in a legal framework always has loopholes or creates some form of a problem or another. One example could be that if you define startup as an early stage thing, then you might create the incentives for companies to stay small. But one of the things that I've been confronted with from rather many startup entrepreneurs and founders is that many of the rules we're now implementing on a European level that are supposed to aim at the larger incumbents, sometimes derogatorily called GAFA, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, and the Apples, like data protection, that it is prohibitive for some of the smaller companies to deploy the same resources to stay and create a company, or to stay innovative or create a company that sort of is in the same realm as the bigger incumbents, by having to follow these rules and having to implement resources to comply with some of the regulation. Would you agree? Would you disagree? Are we prohibitive in regulation, or do we prevent innovation from taking place by too much regulation? Could a definition of startups counteract that? The question is for anyone who'd like to take it. I see you shaking your head. Please, Konstantin, go ahead.
Well, no, I don't think, for instance, take medical devices, you make a lot of rules for that. It would be against the logic of the regulation to then allow startups to have less tested medical devices. It's just that we are overemphasizing regulation and sometimes consumer protection versus, or protection of legacy versus stimulating innovation and allowing kind of testing and also some margin of error. We're doing the same in genomics and in quite a number of these areas. And what I haven't heard, also not at the Scale Up Nation event, and everybody talks about regulation in the domain of startups or in economics, but it's really about all these other domains that do sector-specific regulation that make it impossible for smaller companies to actually compete, because the regulatory costs become so high and the regulatory risk that a big company can absorb that, but smaller companies can't. And so we're seeing medtech companies leave, pharma companies leave, biotech companies leave, because in others, the FDA is just much faster. And it's also in banking regulation where sometimes we are just overshooting the target. And so I don't think a startup-specific kind of exemption would work. It's really that we are still regulating very much for the past and not sufficiently future-proof.
Thank you for that. David, you've raised your hand. Please, go ahead.
Last sentence was great from Konstantin. I think that's the right way. I have to be honest, I'm a bit undecided whether it's prohibitive or not. I tend to say it can be a chance to have a standard, right? And there's probably good arguments why the data protection standards of the EU can be world standards. So I wouldn't say it's prohibitive, but it's certainly an obstacle in the first years. So what I would probably say is I would rather ask for more open data initiatives in return for such a strong data protection law, right? So if you have these high standards, great. Then if startups overcome this obstacle of being that great at data protection, you have to create still a chance for these startups to be super successful, and that could be on the contrary, could be to foster open data, right? If then EU sets standards on how medical data can be accessible, or governmental data, postal data, and that is all in line with data protection laws of the EU, then I think this could be a good combination, a good return for these high standards.
Thank you for that. Heidi, please, go ahead.
I think we're also not really specific enough on what type of regulation we're talking about. We talk about it in a broad sense. So yeah, of course, not if a startup is creating a medical device, it should have the standards that are concerning the medical devices, because I mean we are talking about the lives of humans. But some types of regulations could be made easier, maybe for startups if we would go down that path. But for example, now since I'm coming from the AI world, we also have a proposal for the regulation of AI. And it's like good and bad from the entrepreneurial standpoint, because of course you do need some sort of regulation, because I mean, bottom line, technology can be used for a lot of things and bad things as well. And of course we don't want that. And especially coming from the EU, we do have certain set of values that we've mentioned here already that is good to have regulated. So for example, one of the proposals that when it comes to AI that completely forbids application of AI for social scoring, which is already happening in some parts of the world, but it's not according to European values. On the other hand, what is also like dreading the AI society is the need for certification, because we are not aware and we are not sure what kind of costs will be contributed to that. And we are fearing that maybe, again, the cost of complying to all those regulations will be a barrier for startups to, again, innovate, because you need a space for innovation. So it's not an easy problem to solve, that's for sure. And hopefully, maybe one of the possible solutions are the famous sandboxes that are being mentioned and also in the proposal for the AI regulation, which would enable startups to really, so to say, play with the development of possible solutions and products without the burdens of regulation, and then to see how those regulations maybe could be eased up for them to really scale and offer the solution to the rest of the world.
Thank you, Heidi. Marta, you've raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, but Heidi already said what I wanted to say. It's about compliance with new regulations. And I think this is really prohibitive for startups, especially in Poland, the lack of legal stability. I mean, the breakout of COVID, of course, affected the legal system. And so we had so many special regulations. But I think that during the last few years, it's our reality that regulation changes very quickly, not only because of implementation from the European legal system, but also we have our own local legal act that needs to be implemented by all business entity. And in case of GDPR, for instance, of course, it was much easier for big companies to introduce all rules because they can afford lawyers, they can afford economics, and they can simply afford tax optimization, for instance. So I would call for more legal predictability, more wide law, I think, that can be adjusted to the needs of startups, and maybe some exceptions for startups, not in sensitive areas like people's health, but maybe some incentives for easier implementations of new legal regulations, because really, like in Poland, we have a civil law that is from 1964, and it was the less amended legal act because it's so good and it's really very wide, and someone who wrote it it's like cute imaginations not to overregulate.
Well, yeah, and it's also, of course, challenging for regulation to be as agile as the technology on which we're all working on, right? Venture capital ultimately is trying to venture into unknown territory. So I think that's ultimately a very challenging question, and unless we're so much more agile in deploying these policies and take a more entrepreneurial approach, where we actually trial and test some of these policies, the magic word sandboxes was just mentioned, I think it might even be a flawed endeavor to try and create regulations for this innovation space. As we're nearing the end of our panel, and we have a lot of people listening today from the policy arena that are eager to hear, and this is why the consultations take place, what your take is. I would like to ask each one of you, not just from your personal national member state perspective, but also from a European perspective. Give us your one thing that you would say, I think this needs to happen, it needs to happen now, and if we don't do that, we're not getting where we collectively want to be. And I'm going to be so mean to put you on the spot here. I'm going to start with Mate. Mate, go for it.
Yeah, so I deeply believe that we need to unleash the potential of our universities. So I work also at the university, and I see how many researchers having great ideas, great innovations, can't really do it without a lot of obstacles and without any motivation to do that. So I do believe university space, we need to change something to get more spin-offs, spin-outs out of it.
We've seen that happen in Stanford very early on. Many successes owed to that. Thank you. Marta, you're up next.
More incentives for venture capitals to invest in Europe, especially in Poland, and including employee stock options, because I would consider it like one of these incentives. So make it more friendly to startups.
Great. Okay. David.
Maybe adding an implementation, not directly from the paper. Until today, there's no digital minister in Germany. Many other countries have it. So that's that's a room to grow. But on top of that, I even think that the digital minister for this, like implementing all these measures or parts of these measures, you need the head of state. So you need conviction on top level. So the prime minister, the chancellor, whatever it is in each country. So I hope for the German next government that it's going to be someone who makes this kind of a top priority and not just pushes it to a digital minister. Because in the end, we are European Union, but for legislation and all these things, you still need the member states. So I hope that this can be translated from the EU Council, the next one having the leadership there, and the next one that this is that it's crucial to have exposure on the highest level in the nation.
I agree there all the way, because ultimately many of these suggestions we're making are touching so many ministries. How can you do employee stock option programs coming from the digital minister and not involve the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Taxation? Heidi, you're up next, and we have some time. Take your time. Go for it.
It's so difficult to choose one thing.
Take two.
There are so many that we should, I mean, for us in Croatia, I dare say we need much more dialogue between the public and private sector, and willingness from our governments and actually people there who are sort of ambassadors of digital transformation, new technologies, innovation, everything, because right now it's also not really clear who is in charge of this topic and who would be the person really to make the or enable the conversation with all the necessary, again, ministries and everyone all the stakeholders that should be in charge. So yeah, that is one message for the Croatian government, like really to focus on someone and figuring who should be the one implementing the necessary policies after talking to the stakeholders who can help in expressing the needs, as we have done here through this initiative, because that was really one of the positive surprises for me, to really see the bottom-up approach, where it wasn't something that someone on the top has advised, okay, these are the things that the startups need, but they actually asked all the startups from all the member countries and asked us, what do we need and what can we help you with? So that's it.
Yeah, I'll keep you on the spot. AI and deep tech. I mean, this is for everybody. This is such a major part of our future, and we're so clear that this is going to impact and change society so profoundly. Do you have something specific for that singled out arena to be on the top list of your priorities?
I mean, it's very, very similar again to what startups need in general, because it's mostly again startups that are working on AI and trying to make the best out of it. But one of the things that it would definitely be a good thing for AI startups as well is the cooperation with the public sector. So we've mentioned the open data, and definitely to have sort of a government or the country as the first client, because I think that can help a lot any AI startups in any of the member countries to really be able to innovate and solve the problems of the governments and the public sector, because we all know, and I'm sure all the member countries have them, and then create something that can be offered to many others. So yeah, one thing is open data and much better public procurement, that's for sure. So it goes for AI as well. It could be also very fruitful for, again, countries to specialize maybe in some sort of sandboxes. So, because for example, if we're talking about most popular sandboxes that are for fintech startups that are in London, so in the UK and in Singapore, we can create AI sandboxes on a national level for different industries and have, again, country help with the data, because when it comes to AI, data is crucial. Without that, you cannot build anything. So if we do have support from the government to get access to a lot of data that is in the government institutions, that could be a big driver for the AI startups and startups in general in Europe to really thrive.
Data seems to be a huge silver lining under all of this. Constantine, please.
Yeah, I'd like to support actually what David and Heidi said. Data is crucially important. So what you can do is provide much better data infrastructure protocols. So the whole data strategy of the EU with the data spaces or lakes, I don't know, I think spaces are called, more availability of public sector information, all that, and creating opportunities to share and process data in a privacy friendly way. But support that, like Finland has done. I think Germany has done some work. France has a data hub also for healthcare and agricultural data. So that's stuff we can really do, and Europe can really support that on the whole. And I think we don't say this enough, because we come to these meetings because we think about policy, but a bit less policy wouldn't be bad either. I think in the end, you know, it's the entrepreneurs that build the businesses, and governments tend to do startup policy, and then they want to get involved in everything. The governments are like parents that are overbearing, you know, and they kind of want to be involved in every little step and every step of the funding and every step of the tech transfer and all that. It's getting out of the way, sometimes also a very good policy, and but also being aware of how many of the good intended policies that are developed in one space might have a really profound impact on our capability to innovate in another space. And so I hope that our regulators and our policymakers become much more aware of innovation and of startups, and make sure that we don't make policies that kill off innovation. And so I really, you know, I would embrace that. So don't over-regulate, please. And sometimes stepping out of the way is a really good policy.
Or dare I say, deregulate. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure to have you here today, and it's always exciting to hear from you and see that we have so many knowledgeable people that are willing to contribute and that are helping Europe to hopefully catch up as a group, not just individually per member state, and there's a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you very much, and we'll be right back after a short interstitial. Thanks. So, we are back with, dare I say, the first real Portuguese unicorn. Oh my God, I didn't say this. But Nuno Sebastião from Fitsai, welcome to the stage. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I would really love to know a little bit first about the story of Fitsai. I mean, coming from here, I know you have an offices in the US, so obviously you're internationally focused. But please, before it grew to this massive size that it is today, how did you come up with it? What's the founding story?
Yeah, so 3 people got together, 3 Portuguese, all of us living abroad. 2 of them far smarter than me, and I invited to start a company. We started a company. It was a technology company. We still do the same thing today, as a data and a machine learning company, processing large data sets, find outliers. Spent 3 years going after product market fit. Found that when I moved to the US in 2013, 2014. Focused the company on financial services, and here we are today as the cloud platform to manage financial crime risk across the world. We protect today something like 800 million consumers. 4 of the 5 largest banks in the US work with us. 25% of the payments in the entire United States go through Fitsai and are protected by Fitsai. Work with the major fintechs in Europe and in the US, APAC, in 17 countries, and yeah, that's Fitsai in a nutshell.
Very interesting. And when I think about fraud protection, I always have this counter-terrorist unit in my mind with lots of screens and operators moving the dials. Do you have some sort of stories you can share that are sort of unheard of, some cowboy stories from the world of payment?
Yeah, so there's a few I can anonymously and generically share. We've worked with some of our clients in the US to, for instance, find fraud in their program that they launched with COVID to assist employees or to assist people. They were actually, sending checks, $1,200 checks to every person or every household in the US. There was a lot of fraud involved in that. So we helped them with that. Also for some of the funds that were allocated to small businesses, we helped with that. That in the US, in Europe, in some of the more fintechs that weren't probably as regulated as they should have been, some money laundering activities. In a nutshell, globally, the way we put it to internally and to our constituents is we're a for good company. We do good. We make sure that if you have a financial product or savings account or a credit card, that it's safe to use and that you feel confident in it. And that's generic, but when we hear stories of people that because we stopped from fraudulent activity in their bank accounts, that's actually what enabled them to make to the end of the month when they get the next paycheck, and as opposed to be out of money, that impacts people, and that's a good thing. I believe for us, for our employees, it gives us a purpose. So yeah, quite excited with that. More recently, working a lot on something related to what's called fairness and accountability, transparency, and ethics in machine learning models. So when you apply our models, they make decisions that can impact people. It's really important that they have fairness built in, that they're accountable, that there's transparency, and all above that it's taken into account ethical concerns, gender, minorities, to make sure that the decisions we make and we recommend are the proper ones to keep communities and populations safe.
And maybe before touching on Portugal, the Portuguese ecosystem, your decision to stay here, this was a very interesting point. Are you, from an AI machine learning perspective, are you as scared of what that potential is unregulated as Elon Musk has voiced many times?
Yes. So I believe in regulation in this area. Some of you might remember I actually introduced Stephen Hawking at Web Summit 2017, where he talked. It was his last public speech, and he talked about that that danger. We've seen it in our domains. There was a very public case in the United States where Apple with Goldman Sachs, they saw that there was discrimination built in the credit that was being attributed to people when they were applying for credit cards. The discrimination was not direct. It was biases that were being picked up just because the people who coded it. No ill intention, but they were there because these technologies, they reflect what we as coders, we as developers bring to the table. So I'm a strong believer and supporter of regulation in this area. I've seen what it can do, and we work with regulators in Asia Pacific, in the US, in Europe, to ensure that all of that's taken into account.
Okay, coming to regulation. I mean, I'm an all full-on startup entrepreneur. I've heard everything from deregulate to we need regulation, depending on where you're coming from, right? There's a lot of opinions out there. But regulation usually also often has the challenge that it cannot be as agile as the innovation that takes place, right? So from that perspective, and being in such an agile space, how can we make policymakers understand better? It's a question of getting everybody in the same room and talk more about it. Do we need to develop regulations that have variables like we do coding?
I think we should just, frankly, in this particular case, follow what the US are doing. So they set up a group. It has people from the National Science Foundation, it has people from the government, and people from the industry, but it's very few. There's only like 20 people, and they've built this program. You can search it online. It was led by Eric Schmidt, the previous CEO from Google, and together with Eric Kissinger. I think Eric Kissinger, one of the politicians most respected out there, and Eric Schmidt, I think there's no one more capitalist and more market driven than him. They got together and they put together this document that basically says at all levels what needs to be done. And it's things like educate the government employees on what machine learning is. Most of them don't know. The regulators actually don't know what machine learning is. They don't know what it can do. So they need to be taught what it can technically do. They even volunteer to have people from their companies to spend 6 months at the National Science Foundation, in the government, in the treasury, to help them. And they also invited for those same politicians to spend time at the companies to learn what it is. How do you regulate if you don't know what you're regulating? You do it at eye level and you do it wrong. I think in Europe, the same should be done, which is invite the companies that know what machine learning is, that are ahead, and work with them on how do you regulate, because I think this will keep a good balance between continue to drive that pace of innovation that you need to do, while ensuring that the boundaries are being properly designed, and they're just not some artificial boundaries that some bureaucrat in Brussels dreamed about.
Well, what's so interesting about that approach is that ultimately what you need is for the entrepreneurs and the scientists and the ones that are driving these products to actually educate policymakers, which as a prerequisite though means that the entrepreneurs are willing to spend their time, willing to spend their effort, right? And often, many times when talking with entrepreneurs across Europe actually about engaging with the European Commission, and Europe is so complicated, it's such a waste of our time, let them be in their Brussels bubbles, I have a business to run. So you would oppose that, right? You would say we need to engage with policymakers, and we need to push the agenda on the political level?
Yeah, because think about what's more efficient for you is to have to deal with some regulation that is just burdens you down, and then you move your headquarters to the US because you don't want to deal with it, or work with regulators if they're listening and if they're willing to make sure that you have policies that are sound and that are easy to work with. And I think not always bad. I mean, I think on something that it's very used, we care a lot at Feeds, something like the GDPR stuff. Europe actually took a leading. Australia was the first with something called CDP, Consumer Data Privacy. Europe was the second one to put proper regulations in place, and then only afterward the US followed. So there are areas where it can be properly done, and it just needs to bring people together, but do it in a way that is not bureaucratic. Just let's get the job done.
Right. Right. Coming maybe to Portugal for a second, you have managed to build this company from here, and you've convinced investors, if I'm not mistaken, to invest into a Portuguese company, right? So how'd you do it? Did you have bilingual contracts? Did you have your lawyers do a lot of education? Or did you have super savvy investors that were just so excited to invest that it didn't matter?
Probably a combination of all. So first of all, I think the biggest thing was no one could actually show me why it couldn't be done from Portugal or any other country. No one could show me from Portugal is part of a bloc in Europe that is well regulated. So why couldn't it be done? Now, were there some lack of experience and lack of people being used to do this? Yes, absolutely. Are there some things that need to be improved? Yes, absolutely. But frankly, the money was wired to Portugal. The deal on our side was entirely conducted by Portuguese lawyers, Portuguese tax advisors, Portuguese people. Yes, we haven't done 20 of those, but right now we've raised 285 or 86 million dollars. It all flowed to Portugal, and it's I think being very well taken care of and generating nice returns for our investors. So it can be done, and I hope the ones that come after will do it in a easier way. But not only for Portugal. I mean, Spain, France, whatever, right? I mean, what we don't need to do is to move headquarters just because. Now, these countries do need to be more efficient. Things like stock options, it's a nightmare. We don't know how to do it. We haven't done it. That needs to be fixed. Otherwise, we have to use these crazy things called phantom stocks and whatnot, and that's just wrong.
Yeah. couldn't agree more. Coming from Germany, complexity. I did an angel investment in Italy. It was an absolute nightmare. I had this many papers to sign. So that's coming from all ends. I see more and more forums being created, also locally here in Portugal, around giving that input to government. Are you up for it? Are you willing to join? Can I ask you to jump on it? Next opportunity?
I'm happy to. I'm happy to. I mean, we prepared some of that. We've shared some of that. And it's very, I mean, it's not, you don't need grand ideas to change these things. You need to address a number of things. You know, stock options is probably the most important one. We have 15% of the company in the hand of employees. At today's valuation, that's something like $300 million. And it's in the end of employees. So there's no more sense of giving back and creating wealth to your employees than that. But then it needs to be properly dealt with, because why? Guess what? I don't think this has ever happened in Portugal. People don't know how to deal with it from a tax standpoint. And then, you know, it generates fear, it generates uncertainty. And then worst, then people look, how is this done in London? And then you realize it's very efficient. Why? Because they have history. They have a track record of doing it. So let's just not reinvent the wheel. Let's just copy. Let's just do what London does, what, you know, even Amsterdam or the US do, and just be competitive. There's some things you do not need to reinvent, but you do need to close that gap and catch up.
Yeah, and I believe, just like funding for Angel Seed Series A, there's a couple of ground rules that have been established nowadays in the digital economy on how to do things a little bit better, and I'm all for it. I'm working here in Startup Portugal. I'm doing some of that work on a daily basis. I hope I can engage you in the future. And
happy to help.
Muitos parabéns. I'm really happy to see that this is happening.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you very, very soon. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Nuno.
Thank you for having me. Good luck.
Thank you. Take care. And next up from this consultation day, the Next Generations Innovators Summit, I have one of my good friends, and you know, no matter which country he's from, he'll always be European at heart. My good friend Mike Butcher for his next panel. Mike, the floor is yours.
Hi guys, sorry. I was on mute. Okay, great. Thanks very much for joining everybody. My name is Mike Butcher. I'm the editor-at-large for TechCrunch. And we've got a great panel. We've got somebody who's sideways, apparently Martins Valters. Looks like sideways. So let's see if we can switch his camera around. I just want to open up by saying thank you very much to Simon Schaefer of Startup Portugal and Factory for introducing and also for putting a lot of this together. This is the European Next Gen Innovators Summit 2021 for the European Commission. And it is also under the Portuguese presidency of the Council of the European Union. So thank you so much as well to the Portuguese presidency. And if you want to engage on social media, you can use the hashtags ENGIS21 or EU Next Gen Innovators, or check my Twitter feed at Mike Butcher, and I've tweeted about the event there, and also the link to the YouTube as well. So we're here to share some expertise and experiences with the European Commission and provide some meaningful insights for the future of public policy in the European Union. And the title of this next panel is more or less about unicorns, but just about like how do you do big scale tech companies in Europe? How do you do that? And also we're going to touch on things like deep tech and the green transformation, the Green New Deal perhaps for startups. And I'm joined by some fantastic people. I'm going to give everybody like a minute to just tell us who they are, 30 seconds or a minute to tell us who they are, what they're working on. First of all, if we can start with you, Gianpiero Lotito from Faculty Live in Italy.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Apologies, I'm not Gianpiero, I'm Fabrizio, I'm the Vice President of Facility Live. No, it's our fault. GP is having an emergency unforeseen, so he asked me to step in. If you don't mind, I'm not the founder and CEO, I'm just the vice president, and I do my best, to fill in his shoes. And I would understand you prefer to talk to real founders.
No,
and
totally
CEOs,
fine.
No problem
Please,
for me.
please go ahead, Fabrizio. It's very great to see you, and thanks very much for doing it. Perhaps you could give us maybe a minute, 30 seconds or a minute on your perspective on the subject.
So I also have the chance of being the leaders of the secretary of the Unicorns Group and work with these fantastic superheroes, as I like to call the founder of CEOs of the unicorns companies. I think it is great to see that the Commissioner Gabriel and her staff have reached out to, the superheroes, as I like to call them, and to gather ideas and pick up the brain, because these are the guys that are fighting every day in the field, and to make sure that Europe becomes a superpower in tech. And I think this is an interesting exercise of humbleness on the side of policymaker, having been myself on that side, because I used to work a lot also with Neelie Kroes in the past at the Commission. So I think this is a unique opportunity for Europe to gather the best mind Europe has, and to make sure that we become a unicorn continent that can really have a chance to compete with the US and Far East. And I will stop here.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Fabrizio from CEMED there. Now, next up, can we hear from Radoslav Georgiev, who from GTM Hub in Bulgaria. Radoslav, just tell us what GMT Hub is, and just quickly, and tell us what you're working on at the moment.
Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm Radoslav Georgiev, CTO and co-founder of GTM Hub. And GTM Hub is a software as a service provider of the most flexible results orchestration system. And we help mission-driven organizations to provide them with clarity of their strategy and execution across their teams, function, as well as business units. And just to share my experience here, I'm related a lot to what Nuno Sebastian shared 5 minutes earlier about option grants and all those schemes that startups in Europe have to use in order to attract talent. But at the same time, we have to fight the local regulation to figure out how we can make this possible for our employees.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think it's worth pointing out that GTM Hub has raised $40 million, so definitely on their way to being a European unicorn. Next up, let's hear from Tavi Madiberk from Skeleton Technologies, who I think are originally from Estonia. Is that right, Tavi?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So firstly, thanks for having me. And for those who are not familiar with Skeleton, when Skeleton is the European market leader in supercapacitors for vehicle electrification, for grid stability, for electrifying the industrial equipment. And we have raised now close to $200 million. And our manufacturing is actually in Germany. So I'm calling from the German manufacturing plant as we speak. And I would say that if you look at the wider European area, then we need to think about what are our unique selling points. And if you think about Europe, then Europe has historically had very strong academia and R&D. But vehicle electrification is an ideal example. But if you look at the most successful companies, then of course, this is Tesla in the US, and Europe was clearly lagging behind. And of course, we can look at issues like the entrepreneurial culture, risk-taking, etc. But there's a lot of policy in play as well. And I bring you the Tesla example that back in 2011, when Tesla did its IPO, they raised $220 million on the market. But before that, they had received from the Department of Energy, from the so-called Obama program, we had received a $500 million subsidized loan for evidently a company which was in deep negative losses. And at that point in time, that was not possible in Europe. And if you think about the next phase for Europe, and I genuinely believe that deep tech and clean tech here play a really crucial role. This is basically just unlocking the value of what is already built into the investments into R&D and academia on national level, but also in terms of EU level. And then if you think about policy initiatives, then in the Unicorns group, of course, we have come up with very specific flagships, because if you want to be competitive with US and China, then there may be two aspects, but yes, it's having the right policy in place, both from demand and supply side. But really, when you go against the US and especially China, then it is the need for speed. A need for speed in terms of policy action in deep tech. And few initiatives, what we have working on is what is very clear that public procurement needs to change. If you think about especially deep tech companies and technologies, then usually we can say that yes, Europe is lagging behind in financing, but this type of companies usually require customers. And the early offtake customers are actually really critical here. And we see that the public procurement is about, let's say, 14% of the European gross domestic product. So basically what we have foreseen is that in the innovation part of public procurement, there should be, let's say, separate factor taken into account. And that can ensure that we are not, let's say, buying the past technologies, but we are really making our purchases with a view to the future. And I think that in general in deep tech, some of the good initiatives what Europe is already working on, like the IPCI, which is a good example is the European Battery Alliance. For example, Skeleton, together with Northvolt and now Tesla and BMW and others, is participating in the Battery Alliance. But if you want to be competitive in deep tech with also quantum computing, 6G and other technologies, then Europe needs to here take action. And I think the key is that...
Tavi, I'm very sorry, but I'm going to interrupt you there because I think you've got some great points. And I'm afraid I really want to tease those points out in our wider discussion. But just to finish the introductory period of this panel, can we speak to Martins Valters now of Mintos in Latvia? I gather Mintos has raised 14 million euros in venture capital, and it's a leading marketplace for investing in loans. But Martins, can we hear from you?
Yeah. So what we are building at Mintos, it's a platform for investments where retail investors would come and kind of make their long-term investments in income-generating assets. And we really did start off as kind of opening assets loan as an asset class, where we indeed have the leading place in continental Europe. But as I say, just a start. And coming from a kind of small country as Latvia, so from day one we are thinking about definitely kind of global or at least kind of pan-European expansion. And here we also have kind of early on encountered that, well, even though it's kind of one European Union, it's actually kind of very fragmented and with a lot of different regulations in each country. And in a way, kind of what we believe is that Europe is not using its full potential. So kind of being as one big market, what is great for any company operating here.
That's absolutely very good point. So we've got a big market. There is an issue around regulation. I want to talk to open up the point that Tavi made about procurement, which I think is really important, because let's face it, how do your unicorns grow? Well, they grow because they have customers and they have big markets. So there's no real reason why the EU can't address that. And I think it's also worth mentioning that the COVID-19 pandemic marks a very big turning point. You know, we've got to get business going, we've got to get jobs, and Europeans have woken up to the reality that tech and digital is the de facto enabling technology. We've gone, as it were, from propeller-driven aeroplanes to jet engine aeroplanes in the space of a year, effectively, because of the way that the society has been taken over by digital because of the pandemic. Now, if I could turn first of all to Fabrizio. Now, you are part of Join CEMED, which is a facility to try and get the Mediterranean startup scene going. What do you feel are the big barriers to the way the Mediterranean tech scene can develop?
Okay, I just need to clarify a bit for you. It's my bad, I had to jump on this. So I'm the Vice President of Facility Live. Facility Live is the European search platform as global media de finance. So we have agents in the world in 46 countries in semantic search, and CEMED is one of our platforms that we have developed in collaboration with Startup Europe, the European Commission, and now we have just been awarded the label of the Union of the Mediterranean, Union for the Mediterranean, which is another international organization gathering 43 countries from the Euromed area. And also the European Parliament has included CEMED in a resolution about the MENA region in the aftermath of the Arab Spring. So the idea is that CEMED, which is a platform that connects different innovation ecosystem, is able to allow the whole region to provide more stable economic growth and tackle some issues like we have the migration crisis, which is linked to the fact that economic migrant, like myself, I'm an economic migrant. I live in Brussels. I work in the US, I worked in Ireland, so I mean, I never worked a single day in Italy, so I am an economic migrant. So the fact is that we have people that they like our standard of living, they want to come to this continent, they want to work here, they want to settle here, so we need to face this problem. And we need to understand why they want to come here. And so CEMED humbly tried to collaborate with institutions and governments, but also other startups, investors, universities, and research centers, accelerators and incubators, in order to try to bring together the two sides of the Mediterranean, both shores, and exchange experiences. The challenges are mostly the same from what we see. So the issue we have, in particular in Southern Europe and in the North Africa, Middle East area, is mostly related to sometimes a regulatory problem, but especially access to capital. Access to capital is the #1 problem. We lack, I think, two things. We lack the amount of capital, but also we lack the culture behind how capital is invested. To build a successful company, on average, statistically, you need a founder age 45 years old, according to MIT and Harvard Business Review. You need 10 years to become a successful platform. And to do that, you need patient capital. And the problem is that in the Southern culture, the idea of patient capital is missing. Investors, they are really sharky, allow me to say. They want to invest, and the moment they see a slight chance to make a bit of money, they're trying to pull out. And I mean, it's fair in this if you're part of you are an investor, but it is not the way you build a great company. If you go to the US, now you have investors competing for founders, because founders, they have the choice. They are on the right side of the table. If you're in Europe, until not recently ago, because now things are improving, I mean, you have founders competing for investors. And you are on the wrong side of the table. And I'm sure that Tavi and Radoslav and Martins can explain you better how, I mean, to deal with investors, because if you're European, I mean, it's very complicated. And also if you are from, these southern countries, it's very complicated. So our idea is that the Mediterranean is an incredible, huge opportunity for Europe, is our door to Africa. There is a lot of youth, a lot of talent, and we would like to attract this talent legally. or we would like to have them working remotely. But also there is business opportunity for companies. Imagine, for instance, Bolt, which was supposed to be here, but then I couldn't make it. They have a huge market in Africa. We have a lot of, in Africa needs everything. Actually, I lived in Africa. I have a South African daughters as well. So if you go to Africa, they really need everything, and they really believe a lot in digital. And so we really have a huge chance if we connect with that continent and with that region. And that is why, I mean, we are working a lot and very well with the institution to this extent.
Right.
I see huge opportunity. Okay, I stop here.
Fabrizio, that's a fantastic point. And actually, I'm very glad that you brought that subject up because, as you point out, Southern Europe is absolutely a fantastic gateway to Africa. And what do people say about Africa? Well, it's one of the next biggest markets in the world. It's an enormous market. It's 1 billion people. It's educating and it's developing. And I think also not just for business reasons, but for geopolitical stability reasons, it's important for us to reach across the water to that developing continent. Extremely good point. So we potentially, Europe is leaving money on the table by not engaging more with the talent in Africa and using that young talent, young and innovative talent to build Europe as well as the African continent. But let's also, if I could speak to Radoslav, if you could jump in. Now, you've raised $40 million. You're in Bulgaria. GMT Hub is very much around providing a platform for OKR management, OKRs. So in other words, to assess the performance of employees. But you've raised that money. Now, we've already heard about access to capital. What are the barriers for you to go to the next level at GTM Hub? Is it access to capital? Is it more venture capital in Europe? Is it incentivizing investors in the EU more? Radoslav, over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, at this point, I wouldn't say that we have so much of a problem of raising capital or attracting the attention of investors, just because we've reached to a point in our life cycle where we've already made a few rounds and investors are already tracking us in their systems and they know what's going on. But in the beginning, it was a much different story. You would go to an investor and you would go with a category-defining product or something innovative, and they would expect you, for example, just to operate in a certain category and just make it more efficient than the competition. So that was in the beginning a huge barrier to attracting capital. On the other side, in Bulgaria, we did not know a lot about what were the opportunities for us when we started the business. So we would end up going to ask banks for loans, and they would say, yeah, sure, we'll give you this much what you're asking for a loan. But then at the same time, you have to put the same money in a frozen deposit just to guarantee that you pay back the money. So this makes no sense. And in the beginning, it's quite hard. But after you get a few rounds under your belt, it gets a little bit easier.
Right, yeah, and so maybe raising money isn't necessarily the hardest thing in Europe now. Certainly, as a journalist with TechCrunch, I've seen it become easier and easier. Radoslav, can I ask you a question? Is your HQ in Bulgaria, or is it in London, or is it in somewhere else?
So we ended up flipping the company, first of all, to the UK. And one of the major reasons was exactly the ease of which we would go through the funding rounds with the organization established in the UK. We also gave a pretty big percentage of the company to employees in terms of option pools. So in Bulgaria, this was impossible to make it legal in any way. So one of the reasons we switched to first to the UK in terms of where the company is registered was to facilitate those financial rounds. and then we later on ended up switching the company to be headquartered now in the United States, but still we retain our major workforce in and R&D office in Sofia, Bulgaria.
Right, yeah, so that's an interesting one. And I think as we heard earlier during this session, that there was a good point about maybe looking at how the sort of regulatory environment of the UK helps companies start up quickly, and seeing if those can't be basically copied and put into some sort of European entity, perhaps EU entity, in order to help companies raise money and start up quickly. Taavi from Skeleton Technologies, you had some fantastic points about procurement. Now, we're all familiar with the fact that the United States government, when it wants to really go crazy, it procures enormous amounts of technology from Silicon Valley. It's done it with NASA, it's done it with the military, obviously. It's also done it with, massive companies like AWS, Microsoft, etc. Taavi, I'd love to hear from you how you think that the European Union could speed up its public procurement, thus creating more customers for tech startups, and also at scale. So we're talking, millions of euros as opposed to small amounts of money, so that technology companies in Europe have a ready-made customer in the EU here right now.
Yeah, thanks. So I think it comes down to, as let's say, many things in life, it comes down to economic incentives. Because of course, from a public procurement standpoint, you try to be as efficient as you can. But also what we know is the issue with public procurement is the avoidance of risk and avoidance of new technologies which have not proven in the market. So I think that from a solutions perspective, what we need to look at is that innovation and new technologies are actually evaluated as part of the tender process. And now in terms of the tender process, we give, let's say, additional, let's call it bonus points in terms of implementing the technology. And another way to look at it is also, let's say, setting up from EU level a special type of funding instrument which would somewhat incentivize the national governments in terms of making this type of innovation buys. And I think that we need to look at it. Of course, a normal person would ask, but okay, who pays for all of this? And what we see is that when removing some of the obstacles from certain technologies which maybe have not yet proven so widely in the field, it is good in the end of the day for the taxpayer as well, because you are not buying, let's say, the old and obsolete solutions, but you're going with something more innovative. So there's not a solution where we can say that, let's say, the innovation in each state tender needs to give, let's say, 21.2% of, let's say, the general evaluation. But what is clear that it needs to be part of the public procurement. And I think that especially now when we talk about revamping the infrastructure because of the increase of renewable energy, this becomes more and more relevant. And what we see from the public side, that there is actually the willingness to go after that. But I think that here decisive action needs to be taken, and the effect for the wider society, but also for the companies, can be really significant. Like you point out in the case of US, and we have made a specific proposal in this regard as a separate flagship.
Thank you, Taavi. So that's a very good point regarding the opportunity for public procurement. And obviously it's a big market. Martins Valters from Mintos. Now, in terms of, you're obviously a fintech startup. You've raised 40 million euros so far. And I know that you're quite interested in creating a much more bigger sandbox, innovation sandbox across Europe. Why do you think we need it? How do you think we could set up a bigger innovation sandbox across the EU?
Yeah. So basically, why we need it? So as I said, the kind of European Union, well, it's currently quite fragmented. If we would take it as a kind of one big country, it's, well, what, 500 million people, basically third largest country in the world. So there's just like literally two better places to be in terms of number of people. But in reality, well, it's not like 500 million people in one country, but it's kind of fragmented. And then if you kind of want to scale up or even kind of start some of the kind of innovative things, you're just like held back by those kind of different regulations. You kind of test it in one country, go to another, then you suddenly kind of realize there's something else that needs to be done differently. And as Tavi mentioned, well, any startup, any kind of new innovative idea needs a need for speed. And when you're held back by that, it's basically there is no speed, and then we're kind of lagging behind other countries versus and outside of European Union, where they kind of can test their ideas much faster, and they can come with kind of much more gunpowder in terms of money, with experience, and kind of tackle the market here. The way how we can do that, I think it's well, relatively easy. There's, well, probably more than one way. One would be just like use some of the kind of current institutions which are already working on pan-European basis, such as, let's say, in financial technologies, this could be like European Banking Authority or European Security Market Agency, and put them as like one institution who is ready kind of approve innovative solution, which could then be kind of easily used in any of the European countries. Or the other options, just like make a competition. So there's coming a great thing, which I think anyway will kind of help Europe kind of attracting more money, is European crowdfunding directive. And there's mechanisms that, well, there is kind of European regulation, but you go to the local regulator, and if they kind of approve you, you can kind of work across European Union. So it's really kind of nothing much that we need to invent. There's probably few papers, few policies kind of to put in place, and we're kind of off to go.
Well, I know that fintech is also a massive new area, and because of things like open banking, it's much easier to create a fintech startup in Europe now. Martin, what about the fintech area? Do you think that Europe could go a lot faster in fintech, and where, in what areas, and what do you think is holding it back in terms of fintech?
Yeah, so well, first of all, I think it's many great things have happened, and many great companies have kind of arisen from Europe. Oh, okay, part of them are now outside of European Union from UK, but anyway, with roots here. And even now, like many of the companies from the Unicorn Group, including us, Bitpanda, Klarna, well, they are kind of great companies and have developed fast. But what is missing again is the same kind of fragmented regulation. So let's say as a very hot topic of AML and know your client. So there's like different ways how you need to identify clients. So it means that, well, you create a kind of IT solution for one of the countries, and you, let's say, want to scale up in Germany. If you're not from Germany, and then it's kind of totally different way how you need to acquire clients and need to onboard them. And these things are, well, they don't provide kind of much value. And then like many of the companies are engaged in kind of trying to find the right solution. Well, probably lawyers and some consultants, they benefit from that. But again, like this is problem why some of those companies are in fintech area are growing much slower than they could.
Right. Yeah. So there probably remains a certain amount of blockages in the fintech area. I know that open banking in the UK was transformational in order to create more fintech startups. I know in Germany, for instance, that the insurance tech market has exploded because new insurance startups are creating much better access to insurance because of digitization of the insurance sector. So that's also an exciting area that could be looked at. Kavli, perhaps if I can come back to you, Europe is obviously known very much for its research and development, its universities. Do you think that that Europe has got and the EU has got the best policies towards allowing research and development to spin up into the next big tech companies? Do you think that universities are doing enough? Or do you think that policy around research and development, for instance, you're working in graphene, did you find any barriers to how you were trying to kind of spin up your company and get that very, very high technology out into the marketplace?
Yeah, so absolutely. And if I think back in the history of Skeleton, when actually already in 2009, we started from a small lab of 20 square meters in Tartu, the second largest city of Estonia. And it has been a long journey to setting up the manufacturing plant, servicing the German automotive industry. And I think that what are the key challenges what we faced? Definitely the question was in terms of early stage financing. It has by now gotten much better because if you think about green technologies, when there was kind of the nuclear winter in terms of clean tech, maybe from 2009 until 2017 and 18. So the private market has gotten better, but clearly there's a need for more, let's say, competent fund managers from the private market. And here I think that EU can cut the red tape in terms of getting this capital faster out into the market. And we have also made a proposal that to set up a 10 billion tech fund covering, of course, deep tech and green tech topics. Because if you look at that type of instruments from US and China, and Europe at the moment is not that competitive. And when it comes to scale up, I think that Europe has done already a number of the right moves, but we need to be here more aggressive. And I bring you the example that in 2018, if we talked about European supercapacitor battery industry, there was almost nothing existing, and the common view was that this will be done in China or perhaps in the US. But by now, the tables have turned in a way. But if you look at the amount of gigafactories being built in Europe, then because of the necessary policy, but also the entrepreneurial push, this is changing. And what we see is that the same type of incentives like the EU Battery Alliance, which is part of the so-called European projects of common interest, need to be taken to other areas as well, like quantum computing, 6G, etc. And only that allows us, I would be realistic here if you say that, okay, can it create something unique for Europe? Then the honest answer is no, but this can level the playing field with the international competitors.
Yeah, that would be a very good point in terms of investing more in R&D and allowing that R&D to spin up faster. Radoslav Georgiev from GTM Hub, I'd be interested to know from the enterprise point of view, we are all familiar with enterprise SaaS and how big enterprise tech companies, especially from the US, have managed to get incursions into big corporates in Europe, in the EU. What do you think is holding back EU companies in selling into big corporates, big enterprise company? Is it competition from the big US companies? Is it a lack of visibility? What do you think might be the hurdles to scaling enterprise tech in the EU?
Well, scaling enterprise tech takes some time to get there. Even in the beginning, you may think that you're building enterprise software or enterprise solutions, but once you get to the actual enterprise, you can see that you still have a lot to run. to learn and a lot of things to implement in order to make sure that you're a true enterprise vendor. And the difficulties can be in both areas. First of all, is the fierce competition from everywhere else. And of course, when we're talking about enterprise deals, you have to expect that acquiring customers can take 5 to 6 months and even more. And this in the startup world is almost forever. So first of all, we need to be able to run a longer sales cycle and be able to fuel the company to get to a place where we can support this sales cycle, and of course deepen our technology to make sure that we're a true enterprise vendor.
Absolutely, thank you. And so the enterprise skills, I mean, access to capital and access to enterprise customers is absolutely key to scaling Europe's SaaS startups. Let's turn now to something else, the green opportunity. There's the people have talked about the Green New Deal. There's a European Green New Deal. There's sustainability. There's batteries. There's you know, electrification. I'd like to hear from Fabrizio in Faculty Live if you guys have come across new green tech initiatives to boost technology startups with your work. Tell us about your impression of the green revolution.
Well, I can really share some experience from Facility Life. Because of our technology, our search technology, we require less computational power, and already compared to other form of search technologies. And already back in 2015, we were approached by some investors. They were starting to look into the green thing. And they were interested in looking in companies that allow you to save energy, basically, and that are not just, you know, companies from the energy sector or from the battery sector. So there is an incredible amount of companies that is cropping up, and there is a field that you would not expect from. PropTech is also is a big thing for energy savings when you look at construction companies and the new materials. But digital is one of the big things, I think, because at the end of the day, digital is the most enabling technology we can see out there. And from vaccine to production of new batteries or production of anything that we can put our hands on, you need a digital infrastructure behind it, and everything is hosting on big cloud server farms. And there you also have new things coming up, and we all know that we relied on a few amounts of companies producing the hardware and providing the hosting, and that basically monopolizing the market. And that at the moment, for instance, is impossible to build a data center without, I mean, a technology that is not neither American or Chinese, and which is a huge opportunity also for European companies to step in. The problem we have is adoption. The problem is most of the big corporates out there and governments, and including institutions, when they need to store the data, they rely on these 5-6 companies that we all know and that are out there. And imagine if you are a new hardware provider or cloud provider, as a SaaS provider, and from Europe, and you approach a big government or a telco or a European institution, and you offer your service, you're very unlikely to get the deal, because there are the rules in place. And here I'm connecting to procurement, but also on the trust of us versus our innovation capabilities is very low. I mean, and this is the problem. So there are many opportunities out there. A big one, for instance, that is coming up to my mind is also on blue tech. The sea is polluted, and we have a lot of material in the sea that could be used to produce energy, and you just need to harvest that material. And we have, as a partner of CEMED, a Blue Med initiative, which is powered also by the European Commission, and it's becoming a program, and it will become the mission ocean for the European Commission. And there, I mean, they are having a lot of opportunities for startups and companies looking to fight for a plastic-free sea, but also to think about how you can reuse that material, and that material eventually can be used to produce new stuff, but also to produce energy. And I mean, the sky is the limit. Green is really a big thing, also because I think we as humans, we have created a big problem. And it's not nice to create a solution because you have created a problem, but we have to face it. And I think there is so much opportunities, so much interest on the side of investors, and Europe, because of the big talents we have in research, and because of the universities, the historical universities we have in Europe, we are really able to attract investors and and government attention. And we may have, some people say we have lost the race of the internet or the B2C web, but now there is the race for the green, and in that race we are well placed, to become leaders. And in a way, we can leapfrog, other partners, other international partners that we're dealing with as a continent. Because that's what happened. When you are behind and you're trying to catching up, often you end up leaping and moving ahead of the others. And because constraints creates opportunity. And I think the TAVI in particular here can show us the way. I mean, they have taken a very specific angle, and they can really lead in this transition.
Yeah, very good point. Obviously, Tavi, you'd be the natural person to turn to next on this subject of the green revolution. Do you think that the EU, are you impressed by where the direction the EU is going? Are you happy with Ursula von der Leyen's pronouncements upon how it's going to support innovation in green tech in the next few years? Or do you feel that there are gaps in the market, or other problems that might arise?
So, thank you. So, firstly, being in the green tech sector, when I'm impressed with what my fellow entrepreneurs have done. That is what I'm impressed with, because it's clear with the market demand. And in the morning, I open up the Financial Times, and you can read about, let's say, one of the members of our unicorn club, Northvolt, which is now not the unicorn anymore, like maybe many other companies here, but it's a decacorn valued over 10 billion. So one maybe key message what I would make is that if we talk about supercapacitors, batteries, green technologies, then it is also driving really the value of the startup sector. Now, when we come to the real question, what you asked, what is the necessary policy in place? Then I would say that, let's say the answer is here, half and half. But a very strong policy push was made with the EU Battery Alliance. And that is really of critical importance. But a few aspects what I would highlight. It also deals with the regulation, because if you look at now the grid storage or electricity stabilization market, when today we have in EU 27, we have 27 different regulations. And of course, it is not feasible that, let's say, you develop, let's say, your go-to-market strategy very specifically for 27 regions with very specific requirements. So here it's yet again leveling the playing field. And then maybe the second aspect is really setting up a large-scale EU green tech fund. Because if you look at the energy in general, when let's say the energy market global, it's a 5 trillion market. And of course, let's say it is not only batteries in that market or supercapacitors, but it's very clear that in order to be long-term competitive, significant capital investments will need to be done. So long story short, I think that the entrepreneurs are going via the right way, and there is a set of really ambitious green tech entrepreneurs. From policy side, the right steps have been made. But now, let's say the proof is in the pudding in terms of is it followed up with even stronger policy push from procurement side, but also from capital investment side.
Yeah, well, I think that the debate about the green revolution will probably go on and on, so it's you know, hopefully there'll be great opportunities for European tech unicorns to take advantage of that. Now, another subject is talent and skills, you know, are Europe's tech startups getting the skills and the talent they need? Obviously, so much work has gone remote in the last year because of the pandemic. Do you think, Martins Wolters from Mintos, based out of Latvia, you have created a marketplace for investing in loans. You're a fintech startup. Are you hiring remotely now? Are you getting the talent and skills that you need to boost your business? What could be improved?
I think when we talk about talent, well, it's hard to ever get kind of too much good talent or great talent. So even kind of all the great books you read about well, how the people scaled up their business. So like one theme is common that, well, they always hire like the best people and they never got them enough. So even though I believe we have kind of very many kind of brilliant people here in Europe and in each of the countries. So also we are hiring from abroad. So we did it before pandemics. We do it still today. But what could be improved is speed at which we can hire, especially from outside of Europe. So within Europe, well, the system I think is quite good. But like whenever you need to hire somebody outside of the EU, it takes quite a bit of time. And I remember I was kind of, it was like some 10-15 years going to work in Switzerland for some time. And I think then it took like 1 or 2 months to get the kind of right permissions. And when you look now, nothing has changed. It's just like reverse. It's like getting people from whatever it's been, kind of from Asian countries, Latin America, wherever. Yeah, it takes time, and this is somewhere where we can kind of improve significantly.
That's a very good point, Fabrizio, Faculty Live. Would you guys hire remotely outside of the EU? Do you think that's a good idea? Do you think you should be hiring remotely inside the EU?
So COVID for us was really a major disruption because the number one case in Europe was in Italy, and it was 500 meters away from our HQ. So you can imagine that it was the 21st of February. We immediately decided full smart working for everyone. But since then, and the company is still in full mode smart working. So we have hired, I think, 50% more staff, and we have to develop, and we are an Italian company, and you have to deal with Italian, legislation, which is not the most startup friendly to some extent. We have hired people that we have never met in person, and we had to provide them, laptops and phones and all these kind of things. So we had to work out a methodology to hire people and to recruit and hire people, and to ensure you can trust them. I mean, because this is the problem. This is a problem of trust. And actually, it's not astonishing now because we all know the data more or less statistically. but even for us, we have seen a massive increase in productivity. We now see that there are some problems in terms of the social side. Some people are really missing the office atmosphere, and in particular those without a family and that are living alone. I mean, for them, the office is an important place. But all in all, I mean, the productivity has been massive, and investors, they've changed. I mean, before, you had to have an appointment with the big investors. You had to usually take a flight to London or to the US or some other capitals around the world. And you would have a first meeting half an hour, then you would find another meeting a month after, then you would start the diligence. Now, I mean, even these guys that they found, they didn't know what to do, and during this, the pandemic and during the lockdown, and so they were, begging you for meetings after meeting after meeting. So the investment cycle is going faster and faster, which is a good thing. And so and myself, I'm a very particular case. It's my 8 years as as a remote worker, because I'm the only one in facility like living in Brussels, and I've been living here since many years. So
you were definitely prepared for remote working, I presume.
Yeah.
So just quickly, we're running out of time. I want to just quickly, Radoslav from GTM Hub. Did you guys go fully remote? Did you feel that you could hire international in the way that you wanted to? Could the EU do better on remote work, do you think?
Oh, definitely. The EU can do a lot better on remote work, especially when you want to hire people as employees in your companies. Right now, we have teams in Germany, in France, in the UK. We have individual people in Spain and in Greece. And now we have to keep in mind all of those local legislations when you're hiring people. We went fully remote from day one since the pandemic was COVID-19 hit Bulgaria. And we're following all the recommendations on the specific markets on how when to go to the office, if it's okay to go to the office, etc. Yeah. But being a young company, we were a little bit more prepared to go fully remote. It just took us a day for our employees just to come to the office, pick up their monitors and peripheria, and then go fully remote. The most challenging thing, though, was actually having to scale the team in this time of uncertainty, because we had very big mandates to grow the team, and we're still growing the team. So that's the toughest part.
I see. Well, okay. Well, I think we've only got a minute left. I'm going to do a quick fire question to everybody. And the question is, let's start with you, Radoslav. The question is for everybody, would you prefer in your country to have 10 unicorns or 100 mid-sized tech companies? Radoslav, you first.
I would prefer to have 10 unicorns, because this way the road to even greater scale would be already paved, and you would have a huge talent pool of people that have been through this path and can mentor everyone else in the ecosystem on how to get there.
Right. Fabrizio, what's the question? What's the answer for you? 10 unicorns or 100 or maybe 1,000 mid-sized companies?
Since Europe still has to find the first unicorn, despite some fake news you can find on the media, I would rather have 10 unicorns. Also because if you have 10 unicorns multiplied by 27 member states, you end up having more unicorns than China.
Right, good point, good point. Tavi, what's your answer to that question? 10 unicorns or 100 or 1,000 mid-sized companies in your country?
Yeah, so Estonia with 1.3 million already has 6, so there's not a long way to go. But I take the angle of green tech, and the reality is that in green tech, in supercapacitors and batteries, size matters and scale matters. So definitely to be globally competitive, we need scale, and when we go with whether it's unicorns or maybe even in this industry decacorns.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Decacorns would be nice. Martins, what's your answer?
So I agree with the previous speaker. So 10 unicorns, and these will definitely lead to kind of many more big companies later on. So start with unicorns.
Unicorns are the pick for everybody. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time today on the European Next Gen Innovators Summit 2021 for the European Commission. And I'm going to hand things back to my colleague, Simon Schaefer from Factory and Startup Portugal. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, everyone, today. Thank you for the panel just now. This was fantastic. This was officially the last digital entrepreneurship event for the Portuguese presidency of the EU Council. And it is my duty and my honor now to hand the stage over to you, Senor Ministro. The stage is all yours.
Thank you, Simon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for participating in this event. For more than 1,000 years, Europe has been thriving in creativity and innovation. In science, technology, the arts, or finance, Europe has been at the forefront of innovation across history. And it still continues to be so. In our universities, our scientists, our investigators have been producing science and technology for the benefit of mankind. But we must acknowledge that some things have changed in recent years. We have had more difficulty in transferring all that knowledge, all that innovation to markets and companies. What happens is that if we look at the companies which have grown more significantly and are now more valuable in the last 25 years, we see that few European companies appear on the map. We basically see this map dominated by US and Chinese companies. If we look at what's happening in the entrepreneurship area, if we compare the number of startups, the number of unicorns, the value of investment, the number of workers in these types of companies, we see that the value and the significance of the ecosystem in Europe lags behind that of what's happening in the US or Asia. And even small and innovative nations such as Israel or Singapore are significantly ahead of what we have now in Europe. This is a problem because innovative, fast-growing companies have a very significant impact on the economy and society. They attract investment and are capable of deploying value to societies and the economy. And crucially, they create jobs which employ the most skilled workforce. That sort of jobs which the younger generations, the best trained generations that we now have, are seeking to get. And let's not forget that European universities and our education system still is ahead of most of the world. So we must close this gap between the knowledge, the innovation, the science that is being produced in university, in research centers, and the value that companies can bring to the market and create jobs which are appropriate for the younger generations. We have had reflections across this day and during the past years about why this is happening. Two answers come to the front. The first is the fact that we are facing in Europe fragmented markets rather than one single market for entrepreneurs to facilitate the scaling up of startups which may appear in any European country but which face difficulties in breaking the barriers of going into other markets in Europe. I was very impressed by a conversation I had recently with the founder of a Portuguese unicorn, which explained why he has grown so fast in the United States and not so fast in Europe, providing the same product, the same services across both continents. And he has told me that to cover the whole of the US market, he can service that market from 3 different locations. Whilst in Europe, he's now facing 18 locations. He must deal in Europe with different markets, different rules, different labor laws, different tax laws, which all provide costs and impede a fastest growth, a fastest scaling up of his operations in Europe. This is a topic we have to address. we have to address by thinking on a continent-wide basis, rather than looking into our 27 small markets, trying to get ahead a little bit by little bit, but not providing the sufficient scale that innovative and fast-growing companies need to encompass. The second problem that we have, and have identified, is access to capital. The very large pool of money in the US is willing to be deployed in these companies at all stages of their growth, and taking the risk and making sure that they are willing to invest. The same doesn't happen at the same scale in Europe. Again, we have fragmented markets, different supervisory rules, and the inability to make sure that the supervisory rules allow institutional investors to deploy part of the monies that they manage in this kind of risky business. So we need to address these two things. Look into the rules and how to break barriers and create a truly European single market for tech and digital companies to grow fast, and also how to facilitate access to capital. Within the Portuguese presidency of the Council in this last semester, we took two initiatives which I think all member states embraced and was supported by the Commission. The first was the Startup Nation Standard. We tried to identify, working with entrepreneurs, working with investors, and working with all member states, what are the exact features of an ecosystem which allows startups to appear, to grow, and prosper. The Startup Nation Standard is a sort of roadmap to build not only startup nations across the continent, but to make sure that Europe becomes a startup continent. We also created the Startup Nations Alliance to make sure that we can, the European Startup Nations Alliance, to make sure that we can follow up on the information on how the ecosystem is working, how it is delivering on its promises, and how we can best learn from best practices across the continent. We've learned today about two very important initiatives from the Commission, and I take the opportunity to salute Commissioner Maria Gabriel for these initiatives, about the Next Innovation EU and the Challenging Europe Roadmap. These are two very important programs to make sure that we continue to accelerate on this topic. And also the Digital Europe program is going to be critical to make sure that we can provide capital and support at all stages of the growth of a company. I do believe that we have all the conditions in place to make sure that we continue to take advantage of the talent, creativity, and impulse of all the entrepreneurs and companies across Europe. We just need to make sure that we continue to work effectively and in an articulated manner, that we look into Europe and the European Union not as a collection of divided markets and separate pools of money, but rather like the single market that it truly is. That's the promise for our citizens and our firms. And I think that continuity of policy, the continuity of the work we have been doing with the Commission, taking over from Germany as the previous presidency and working together with Slovenia going forward, that continuity is what will create the conditions to have an effective policy change which really impacts on the lives of our companies, our entrepreneurs, and crucially, our citizens, in the name of a continent which not only grows, becomes more digital, but becomes more prosperous in a shared and inclusive manner. Thank you very much.